of my office as clerk to the Dare County Board of Commissioners.
as my office as clerk to the Dare County Board of Commissioners.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And I will solemnly swear
And I will solemnly swear
that I will and truly execute the duties
and I will and truly execute the duties
of the office of clerk of the Dare County Board of Commissioners
of the, as a clerk of the Dare County Board of Commissioners
according to the best of my skills and ability,
according to the best of my skills and ability,
according to law.
according to law.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Welcome. Get the better half of it. As most of you know, Cheryl was retired on Friday, and our board's excited to have a nice young talent as such as Skylar to join us and be a part of our board and a clerk to us. And we look forward to working with her, and we certainly know she'll do a great job. With that being said, I will turn the meeting back over to our county manager.
Good morning, everyone. Item 1 on our agenda is the chairman's opening remarks.
Thank you, County Manager. Just have 2 items this morning. I'd like to recognize the fact that a fellow board commissioner recently passed away. Jack Shea was born on January the 21st of 1927 in Orange, New Jersey. He served in the United States Army during the Second World War in Germany. He graduated from Bethany College in West Virginia with a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry. Jack held managerial director positions in quality control, quality assurance, and regulatory affairs. In 1987, he began consulting worldwide for some pharmaceuticals, biologics, and medical devices. While working internationally, he had patents with the Japanese co-inventors. Jack also served as a member of the board of directors of the Biodelivery Science International. He served as a member of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary for some 30 years, where he obtained the rank of flotilla commander. Jack was elected for 3 terms, 12 years. I had the privilege and pleasure of serving with Jack 8 of those 12 years. He also served as chairman of the Holy Redeemer Pastoral Council in Southern Shores Fire Department and board member of the Tourism Board representing Dare County. A mass was recently held at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, July the 26th. My fellow commissioners served as pallbearers for that Jack's funeral, and it was at Holy Redeemer Catholic Parish in Kitty Hawk. And he was his interment was in Southern Shores Cemetery. I go by there quite often, so if you're ever going down that way by the golf course and you look over to the right, it's that cemetery, and it reminds me of a number of friends who are certainly interned there. And it'll be nice just to ride by there and think of Jack often. Like I said, I had the privilege of serving for some 8 years with him on this board, and what a prince of a guy. One of many greatest generations that we've lost over the years. So rest in peace, my friend. I wish Jackie the very best, his spouse. The next item I have the honor of recognizing several folks this morning for their work. On behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I'd like to acknowledge and honor 2 very incredible individuals who've had a profound and lasting impact on so many people in Dare County, especially, if not hundreds, of young children right here in our community. And that's best-selling author Suzanne Tate and illustrator James Melvin. Whether or not you know their names, I can all but guarantee that you and your children know and absolutely love the amazing body of work that they've created together over the past 3 decades. These two have collaborated to publish dozens of books together for their long-running children's nature series. This incredibly creative pair first officially joined forces to begin collaborating on books way back in 1988, when their first book, Krabby and Nabby, A Tale of Two Blue Crabs, first hit the shelves of gift shops up and down the Outer Banks. From there, the pair went on to create dozens of more books that have become a favorite read among thousands of children, both residents and visitors alike, over the years. These books include Flossie Flounder, A Tale of a Flatfish; Danny and Daisy, A Tale of a Dolphin Duo; Lindy Lobster, A Tale of a Big Claws; Skippy Scallop, A Tale of Bright Blue Eyes; Mary Lee Monarch, A Tale of a Big Trip; and Tommy Tuna, A Tale of a Big Fish, and this is among many others. Their books can be found in dozens of local gift shops in Dare County, and I certainly think it's safe to say that most of us and of you in this room today, and those that are watching our meeting online, are familiar with their work, whether they are aware of it or not. Over the past 3 decades, Susan and James have forged and returned a partnership that has led to creation of so many unique stories about assortment of creatures that can encounter in real life here on the Outer Banks. In addition, the pair brought to life so many stories and brought immeasurable pleasure to so many children, from preschoolers whose parents are reading the books to them, to children in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades who've fallen in love with the series and look forward to each and every new release the pair publishes. Suzanne and James have fostered a love for not only reading, but also of learning about the wide array of wildlife, from scallops and sea turtles to oysters and others that call the beaches, marshes, and waterways of the Outer Banks home. For those of you who want to find more information about Children's Nature series or order the books online, you can visit www.suzannetate.com. On behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I want to thank you, James and Suzanne, for all of your incredible contributions to readers of all ages through Dare County and all along the Outer Banks for so many years. If you'll join me down front, I have a presentation for each of you. Welcome, Ms. Tate. Welcome. I've got a special certificate for you, and it says Dare County awards this certificate to Suzanne Tate in grateful recognition of your creativity, passion, and ability to bring to life and stories of the many unique characters whose tales are told upon the pages within the dozens of books that comprise your best-selling children nature series. Over many years, you have brought immeasurable pleasure to the thousands of children who have fallen in love with this series. Your incredible body of work not only educates readers of all ages about the abundant wildlife that calls home the Outer Banks home, you have also helped to foster a deep and lasting love of reading that these children will carry with them for their entire lifetime. The Dare County Board of Commissioners salutes you for the profound, positive, and unparalleled impact that your best-selling series of books continue to have, your years and years of children of Dare County and beyond. Thank you so much. As you very well know, folks, reading is very, very special, and she promotes this through her books, and reading is so positive to educate kids and help them. And this has been incredible, Suzanne. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Cool.
thank you.
James? We didn't leave you out, James.
A very important part of it, too.
Absolutely, absolutely you were. Once again, we have a certificate for James in his recognition of his extraordinary creativity and exceptional artist ability and skills that you've brought life to the many unique characters whose tales are told in the best-selling children's nature series. For many years, James has created spectacular illustrations of wide array of creatures that have intrigued and inspired thousands of children of all ages, helping to educate them about the various species of wildlife that certainly call Dare County home. Once again, the Dare County Board of Commissioners salute you, James, for your unparalleled ability to create the many one-of-a-kind illustrations that have played an integral role in making the best-selling nature series a favorite among Dare County residents and visitors. Thank you so much for partnering with Suzanne. Let's do this. Special people, folks. Our board has no problem when it comes to recognizing good people in our community, and these certainly are some of the best. Thank you. Thank you again, Sue. God bless you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
God bless you, too.
Absolutely. Once again, two very special people giving back to their community, and what an honor it is to be able to recognize individuals of this character throughout our community. That completes my chairman's comments, County Manager, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That leads us to item 2 on our agenda. That's the award of our service pins and an opportunity for us to recognize our employees publicly. This morning, we're going to recognize 55 years of service to Dare County with 3 people. First, if Margaret Lee would come forward to receive her 15-year pin from Cindy Parker.
Welcome, ladies.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chairman Woodard. Margaret began working for Dare County in August of 2008 as an administrative specialist. As you know, Margaret is a receptionist for our building. Last week, Margaret and I were talking about some of the phone calls or things she sees from her desk. She routinely sees engaged couples looking for marriage licenses. She's had a couple to come in their wedding attire to get married. She gets lots of phone calls about Dare County in general and not necessarily about government. Recently, she's had to explain to someone where they could put their kayak in the water. She gets to see people in all stages of dress and undress from her front row view at her desk. Unfortunately, our parking lot seems to be a very popular place for people to get dressed and undressed. Margaret does a great job. Since she's the first person that you see in walking into our building, she sets the tone for our visitors. She is always, always warm and friendly and makes people feel welcomed. She is kind and courteous to our visitors and to the callers. She directs people or calls to the appropriate place. She knows something about every department within Dare County government and a lot about non-government related places. She juggles our meeting rooms on a daily basis, and in her time off, she enjoys her yard work most of the time. And she loves spending time with Lawson and Sabra, her grandchildren. Congratulations, Margaret, and thank you for 15 years of great service.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Margaret.
Thank you.
And no doubt, she's the first person you see when you walk in the building. I've been here some 11 years now, and she's always got a smile on her face. She's always very polite and very courteous, and we couldn't have a better face for somebody to see as soon as they walk on our campus here. And congratulations, Margaret. Great work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Next, if Amy Crawford would come forward to receive her 20-year pin from Sandy Pace.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. Good morning. Amy started her career, obviously, 20 years ago, and she started at the Parks and Recreation Department on the beach. And she did 11 years there and then transferred over to the Virginia Tillett Community Center. Just like Miss Margaret, Amy is the face of our facility. She's the first person you're going to see when you walk in the door. Without her friendliness and genuine care and concern for folks, they wouldn't get past that front office. And so we're grateful that she provides that for all the people that walk in there. She too sees a lot of people trying to get married and being in the wrong place. And haven't seen anybody undressed in the parking lot, though. That's not ours. But Amy is an outstanding employee. She, I don't know how she gets what she gets done in a day, honestly. She's fielding calls. She's helping people that are coming in and out of the building. She's a great help to every employee that's in the building. She manages our calendar and keeps the master calendar straight. And so without her, the rest of us couldn't do our job as efficiently. So I'm grateful for her work and what she does there. And in Amy's off time, she spends a lot of it at the gym. As you can tell, she's very fit. She likes to eat and she loves Diet Coke, if you know anybody wants to give her any of those things. But congratulations, Amy, on 20 years, and hope to see you for many more.
Gosh. Thank you, guys.
Next, we have Jeffrey Ambrose, if he'd come forward to receive his 20-year pin from Kevin Dupree.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you guys very much. Sheriff Dowdy couldn't be here this morning, so it is my honor to stand in place for him for Jeff Ambrose here, a co-worker, a friend. Jeff Ambrose is a lifelong resident of Dare County. Came to work for the Sheriff's Office 20 years ago, August of 2003. He's married to Crystal, has 2 kids, Ben and Hannah, has 2 grandbabies now, Hadley and Harper. So he splits time a lot now with us and them, but we're grateful for that. He started with us in Patrol Division. He moved from that after about 6 years to our SRO positions when we started filling all the spots in the schools with SROs. Did that for 11 years, kind of set the standard for that for our county and what that should look like. Done a wonderful job in that position for us. He moved over to Criminal Investigation Division, which I was grateful to see him come over for a lot of reasons. That was about 3 years ago. And his knowledge, because he was an SRO, and the families and the kids and everyone he dealt with during that time and done it so well, they all enjoyed him and liked him. It was great to have him come to us, because when we have cases that deal with trying to figure out who some of the younger generations and their parents and all that, from living here and dealing with them for so long, he's able to step right in and help us greatly. So he is a Christian, serves here at the First Assembly of God right here in Manio, and we can't thank him enough for being with the Sheriff's Office and everything he does for us, and hopefully we'll have him a few more years, and we just greatly thank you guys, and Mr. Allen, thank you guys for having the opportunity to come up here and recognize him for 20 years. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your service. Absolutely.
And that leads us into item 3 on the agenda, our Employee of the Month. And if Roxanna Ballinger would come forward to make that presentation.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. We'll have to move this mic down a little bit for both of us. It's an honor this morning to come forward and talk about Norma as Employee of the Month for the county. Norma started in 2018, and she's an administrative technician. The WIC program couldn't live without Norma. She manages all the appointments for 3 offices: the Manio office, the Kill Devil Hills office, and the Frisco office. She takes on additional responsibilities all the time. She manages all the WIC vendors in the county. She serves as a breastfeeding peer counselor. She's also an interpreter for Spanish WIC appointments. But she goes beyond that. The clinic also has interpreters, and sometimes we all get in time crunches with vacations and people being out. Norma steps right in there. She is always customer focused and always thinking about the community and the clients that we serve, and puts them first. People actually call the WIC program and they just ask for Norma. She's on a first name basis with many of the clients. The Hispanic community trust her as a great resource, that she's going to lead them in the right direction no matter what it is that she needs. She's always had a lot of integrity. She's a hard worker. She goes above and beyond consistently. During COVID, we all had to make a lot of changes very quickly. Those changes couldn't have happened within the WIC program if it wasn't for Norma. We all had to learn how to be virtual experts really quick. And WIC had to go through a lot of changes with all their clients. They used to see clients all the time. They had to go to virtual and phone contact with all their clients, and that truly was a challenge. Norma genuinely cares about all the women, the babies, and the children that we see for their well-being and their nutrition. She helps out her other employees. We've had some new employees come along in the WIC program, and she's been just instrumental making that transition for them about how WIC works and making their life much more easier. She's a valuable member of our team, and we want to keep her around forever. She's a wonderful person, and we all love her. And it's an honor to give this to her. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to public comment, anyone who's received an award, please go right out through this door so that we can get a picture made. Ladies and gentlemen, now's the time that's been set aside for public comment. We have a little bit of a number of public comment opportunities today. If you're here about the county zoning ordinances, which is the next agenda item, then please wait until we do that public hearing. If you're here to have public comment about the William David Stowe cluster housing, you can make your public comment now for that. However, if you're here to present evidence for that cluster home development, then you need to wait until we get to that item on the agenda. With that said, if you have public comment this morning, please limit your comments to 5 minutes. There's a green light up on the podium that will come on. When it comes on, your time begins. There's a yellow light that will come on when there's about a minute left. And when the red light comes on, you need to conclude your remarks. I have a sign-up sheet. I don't know what this is signed up for, but I'm going to go down it if you'd like to make public comment. The first one I can't read. Looks like Ronald Williams. Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Welcome this morning, Mr. Williams.
I live at 40191 Kitty Lane, adjoining property to Mr. Stowe's land. And my concern is this is a very narrow strip of property. And if he's going to do any kind of grading or building up this property, it's going to affect the surrounding 13 other family properties around it. And we have concern about building these houses back in the old village of Avon. So what we have here, I have 10 pages of signatures of local villagers and some out that don't live in the village I'd like to present to you. And what we'd like to do, maybe if you would consider it, a lot of people are working today, and it's hard to get off this time of year. Maybe consider, like you've done in the past, is come to the Avon Fire Station and have a public comment. Instead of having their signature as their voice, let them speak in person before you consider to vote on this.
You can give those to me.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Next is Donald Taylor.
Welcome, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Commissioners. I live at 40199 Avalona, so I back right up against the property. We've been there 9 years, and to me, it's a narrow strip of land, and it's hard to see houses right behind us that we can see the neighbors on Kitty Lane, and how we're going to have 7 houses plus a road in between. It's to me, it's awful crowded, and it's not what we had envisioned when we moved here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Next is Jim Schultz.
Welcome this morning, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Jim Schultz. I live on Avalona Drive. As the other two gentlemen have said, it's a narrow, long strip of land. It's chopped up. You can hardly enter it. There's no entrance from the east side because there's a canal. On the west side, there's 2 existing parcels, people living in them. They've been there forever. I don't know what the width of the opening would be to get to the parcel. It's almost closed off. But as Mr. Williams said, there would be 7 houses, 2 bedrooms, two-car driveways, no space for guest cars. Somebody could rent one of those houses, the proposed houses, and have 10 guests on a weekend. Things like that happen. So my point is, it's too small a parcel of land. You've got too much proposed building. And if you allow it, you're going to make people on Kitty Lane and Avlona Drive miserable because there's just not the space for that much building. And secondly, I went over to Highway 12 where an existing, if this strip could go all the way to Highway 12, but it's separated by a canal. And another person bought the front section of it. They built one house, and you look from Highway 12, you look west, you see one house with trees on each side of the one road, and it's reasonable. And the people on the surrounding streets have some trees and some coverage. What is proposed by Mr. Stowe is not reasonable. It doesn't fit the parcel, and it's just too much construction. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
Next is Chris Hanberger.
Welcome this morning, Mr. Hamburger.
Thank you. Appreciate the time from everyone. I'm a resident of Avon. I'm a property owner on Kitty Lane. I abut this development. I'm here because, a lot of my neighbors couldn't get off work to come up. And I appreciate the time. I echo the comments of, my neighbors that, it's very hard to stand here. I've never been one to say what someone can do with their property. But when it does look to be such an effect on those of us that are around that property, it seems like you do need to say something. The present development plan does seem to be excessive for that piece of property, how narrow it is. The elevation is a concern. Last good flood we had in there, at the time I didn't own that property, but I know water was right up to the edge of the house or the bottom of the house. You start adding additional height around it, neighbors are going to flood, and that's a concern. You put 14 bedrooms, the equivalent of 14 bedrooms, into a narrow strip of property. That's a concern. Wastewater is a concern. That canal being right there at the edge of the property is a concern. So I just hope it would be revisited, and perhaps a different plan would be proposed that would still make sense for everyone, that's in the community, because I really value Kenneketon. I think it's a very special place to live. And I want to see it continue to grow and make room for everyone that needs a place to live, but just in a sensible way. And it seems like as a board, you all have had the same view, and you've made, you've actually made regulations, laws in the past that have kind of excluded developments like this from certain areas unless there's a special use permit, and that's what Mr. Stowe has done, right? As he needed to. But I just hope the community will be involved. As Tooley had mentioned, perhaps a local comment period down in the town where everybody can actually get there in the evenings, because it is such a busy time of the year. They're just not able to come. But you can see the interest based on the number of signatures that have been passed around the village and presented to you all. So thank you very much for the time and willingness to accept comments.
Thank you, sir.
Ray Meekins.
If I might reserve my comments for the quasi-judicial.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't think you've been sworn, so before you speak, you'll need to be sworn for that.
Right.
Okay. Basil Hooper.
Good morning.
Welcome, Mr. Hooper.
I'd like to thank the commissioners for allowing myself and the others to speak concerning the cluster houses proposal in Avon Village. My name is Basil Hooper, and I'm a resident of Avon Village. My family goes back to the 1700s in Avon, so I have somewhat of a vested interest in the village. I live back there. The village of Kinnikee, as I call it, has always been a kind of a quaint, quiet, somewhat isolated nature. Our neighbors have the luxury of walking around without a whole lot of traffic. The proposed cluster homes would add extra traffic and make it less safe. We don't have the benefit of having a sidewalk around the village. As a longtime member of the Avon Volunteer Fire Department and recently retired from Dare County EMS, I also see safety issues. The proposed plat presents issues of ingress, egress, and the easement terminates to a dead end with no cul-de-sac for turning around. Our ladder truck, our apparatus is 42 feet long, 8.5 feet wide. Our secondary pumper is 36 feet long, 8.5 feet wide, and maneuvering these vehicles down this proposed road, this easement, would be difficult at best. I'm also a building contractor of over 30 years, so I know about going through the process of going through the planning board, the building department regulations. The property being considered for the cluster homes is 67,500 square feet. And if you go back to the 15,000 square feet with a water meter or 20,000 square feet with a water well, that means 4 lots maximum, other than what is being proposed. I have no issues with the 4 lots, and I don't think it's unreasonable to put those 4 houses in there, as Mr. Stowe could do. The commissioners recently rescinded the cluster home ordinance in R2A in 22 areas of unincorporated Dare County, and I thank you for listening to the citizens' concern in doing so. It's my understanding that the cluster home application process is not finalized until the commissioners have input from all sources, including the planning department and your constituency, namely residents impacted. We have many names on the petition has been given to you. Avon Village is somewhat similar to Wanchese, and it's a family type setting. It's isolated. It's different from other villages. The commissioners voted 5-0 to remove the cluster home ordinance from Wanchese, and I propose the same for Avon Village. The public opposition was the same in both towns with the same concerns. I kindly ask the Board of Commissioners to vote to stop this cluster home application for the good of the Avon Village community. Thank you for hearing us out and taking our concerns into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hooper.
Next is Donna Creef.
Donna, welcome this morning.
Good morning. As Mr. Outen said, my name is Donna Creef, and I serve as the Government Affairs Director for the Outer Banks Association of Realtors, and I'm going to speak for a few minutes this morning about insurance. Advocacy of insurance issues is one of my responsibilities as the Government Affairs Director. Recently, the Board of Directors of the Outer Banks Association of Realtors adopted a resolution in support of federal legislation that would extend the National Flood Insurance Program for 5 years, and it would also make significant changes to the National Flood Insurance Program. This act is entitled the National Flood Insurance Program Reauthorization and Reform Act of 2023. Currently, the NFIP is set to expire on September 30th of this year. We have sent a copy of our resolution to Senator Budd, Senator Tillis, Congressman Murphy, and Congressman McHenry, who serves from the 10th District of North Carolina, who chairs the House Financial Services Committee, which oversees insurance issues. Our request today is that the board consider adoption of a similar resolution in support of the long-term reauthorization of the NFIP. I'm also going to speak just a little bit about insurance. We spend a lot of time talking about insurance at OBAR, and our members that are insurance agents are advise of the narrowing of the insurance market in North Carolina and the Outer Banks. What that means is that there's less companies offering insurance coverage in the Outer Banks. One of the large insurance companies recently decided not to renew homeowner policies in coastal North Carolina. I was affected by that. I've been with them for 34 years, and they're not renewing my homeowner's insurance. They're doing this to limit their exposure. They're saying that, the risks are so great here in the Outer Banks and in coastal North Carolina that they need to limit their exposure. We're also hearing of significant increases in homeowner premiums, sometimes $10,000, $20,000. Granted, a lot of this is based on increased house values, which are a positive thing, but the increased insurance premiums are a cause for concern. We're concerned that with the increase in cost in homeowners policies, that those properties that may be in X zones or shaded X zones where mandatory requirements for flood insurance are not required, that folks are going to be faced with the opportunity to say, okay, I have a budget for insurance, I'm not going to have my flood insurance, and so they're increasing their exposure as a result of the decisions by the corporate insurance companies not to insure properties in North Carolina and the coastal areas of North Carolina. So they're decreasing their exposure, but they're increasing the exposure of the property owners on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Last week, the North Carolina Rate Bureau also announced a filing for dwelling policies. Dwelling policies are those policies that apply to second homes and rental properties versus a traditional homeowner's policy that you have for your primary residence. This is a rate increase of 78.6% for extended coverages in the districts, the territories of the Outer Banks. This comes on the heel of a rate increase that just went in effect in June of this year for dwelling policies, which they haven't even had time to establish what the effect of those rate increases were. Over the past few years, governments at all levels have spent a great deal of time and effort on money addressing natural hazards and how we mitigate those risks. In fact, North Carolina even has an Office of Resiliency and Recovery whose sole purpose is to address how North Carolinians are affected by climate change, sea level rise, and other environmental conditions. I suggest their efforts should be expanded to include resiliency and sustainability of the economic climate change occurring in the insurance industry. A community that is not adequately insured does not recover from storm events when they occur. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and enjoy your meeting.
Donna, I know you emailed us a copy of that resolution.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a copy for the county manager for
I have a copy with me. I can give him. Yes, sir.
Thank you. We need that for the record.
That's all that I have signed up for. Anyone else here for public comment? Any public comment from Buxton?
No comment from Buxton.
With that, we would close the public comment and we'd move to item 5. Item 5 is another public hearing. From time to time, you all change your ordinances, and when you change the ordinances, they go in the ordinance book. The ordinances are compiled by a group outside the county that put our ordinances books together. They post them online. And so annually or semi-annually, we come back to you all and say, we're going to re-adopt all the things that you changed just to make sure we cover all of our bases and get these things properly in the ordinance books. And so that's what this agenda item is. You're simply approving a couple of years of ordinance. You've already approved them individually. You're going to now approve them as a group, and then they'll get compiled and put online in our ordinance book to be sure everything is up to date. And so I need a motion and your approval.
Do you need a motion with the resolution as well?
Yes, sir.
You care to read the resolution?
Let's do the public.
You want to do it at
the
public comment first? Okay.
I don't think anybody will be here for that, but is there anyone here who'd like to speak to that issue this morning? Any public comment on that issue? Don't hear any public comment from Buxton?
There's no.
With that said, Mr. Chairman, I will read the resolution.
Okay.
Whereas American Legal Publishing Corporation of Cincinnati, Ohio has completed the S13 and S14 supplements to the Dare County Code of Ordinance, which supplements contain all ordinances of a general and permanent nature and enacted since the prior supplement to the County of Dare Code of Ordinances. And whereas American Legal Publishing Corporation has recommended the revision or addition of certain sections of the Code of Ordinances which are based on or make reference to North Carolina general statutes. And whereas it is the intent of the Dare County Board of Commissioners to accept these updated sections in accordance with the changes in the law of the state of North Carolina. And whereas it is necessary to provide for the usual daily operation of Dare County and for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare of Dare County, that this ordinance take effect at an early date. Therefore, be it resolved by the Dare County Board of Commissioners that the 2023 S14 and the 2022 S13 supplements of the Dare County Code of Ordinances, as submitted by American Legal Publishing Corporation of Cincinnati, Ohio, and attached hereto is adopted by reference as if set out in its entirety. Such supplements shall be deemed published as of the date of its adoption and approval by the Dare County Board of Commissioners, and such supplements shall be inserted into the Code of Ordinances kept on file in the office of the clerk. This is the 7th day of August, 2023.
Thank you, County Manager. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
There's a motion to approve by the Vice Chairman. It's been seconded by Commissioner House.
I do have one amendment to make to it.
Okay?
Under the attest, where it has Skylar Foley, Deputy Clerk of the Board, strike the word deputy.
Yep.
All right. With that said, Mr. Chairman, that brings us to item 6 on the...
We got a motion. We need to vote on that motion. Those in favor of the motion with the change deleting deputy, please signify aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Chairman, that brings us to item 5, and this is the public hearing on the, this is the special use permit for the William David Stowe Cluster Housing Development. Before we start, just a few comments so that the people that are listening and the people here today for that will understand what this is all about. Under the law in North Carolina, a special use permit is a quasi-judicial hearing. That means that the applicant is required to put on evidence to show and prove to the board that all of the conditions of the Code of Ordinances have been met. If he can prove that, then the board by law is required to issue the permit. If he cannot, then they're required by law to deny the permit. The applicant will put on evidence first. If there's anyone here who has competent evidence to show that the applicant has not met the terms and the conditions of the ordinance, then they have the opportunity to put on that evidence at the completion of the applicant's evidence. One other thing that in follow-up to Mr. Stowe's comments, the cluster home ordinance has been repealed in this area? Yes, sir. Yeah, so the cluster home ordinance has been repealed already, as you've requested. The issue here is this application came in prior to that ordinance being repealed, and by law, we're required to move forward under the ordinance that was existing prior to the repeal, since his application was already in at that time. I know that Mr. Gray here is an attorney. I think he's representing some of you all, and at the end of this, if I've misstated that or if he disagrees with my interpretation of law, then he can certainly bring that forward to the board as well. And so I say all that so that you know, as going forward, the only thing this board can do is listen to the evidence and determine whether or not the terms and the conditions of the ordinance have been met. If they have no choice but to grant the permit. If they do not meet that burden of proof, then they have no choice but to deny the permit. They do not have the discretion to say yes or no because they don't like it or they don't want it or whatever else. If they meet the terms and the conditions of the ordinance, they're required by law to issue the permit. With that said, anyone that would like to put on evidence has to be sworn. I know that the applicant, Mr. Bissell, have been sworn. Krause, if you've got someone to testify, then you come on up and get sworn now before we start. Is there anyone else that wishes to present evidence at this hearing so that we can get you sworn now? All right, no one else to present evidence. With that said, Mr. Dixon, Noah, if you come on. Under the law, Noah has presented the file. The file is in evidence now under the law, and so all the contents of the file that have been submitted to Dare County or before the board are in evidence and before you. Noah has been sworn. He's going to give his testimony concerning this now. Mr. Dixon, you have the opportunity to ask questions of him if you choose. Mr. Gray, you have the opportunity to ask questions of him as well. With that, Noah.
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Mr. Stowe has submitted a special use permit application for a seven-unit cluster home located on Old Main Road in Avon. The property is identified as parcel 0146900002 in the Dare County tax records. The property is zoned R2A, and at the time the application was received, cluster homes were still permitted as a special use in this zoning district. On May 17th of this year, it was removed from this district, but as Mr. Outen stated earlier, that if application is received prior to a zoning text amendment or change, that the applicant can have permit choice, and in this situation, Mr. Stowe is choosing the prior ordinance. When an applicant chooses permit choice, that plan then has to be vested, and under section 22-88, there's rules that regulate a plan that's falling under permit choice. So there's multiple different steps to this project and process. Cluster homes, as we have seen in the past, they're subject to 31 days longer occupancy. The proposed site for this project is 1.58 acres, or 68,963 square feet. The houses that Mr. Stowe is proposing are 900 square feet, meeting the requirements of the 1,200 square foot maximum. They're separated by 24 feet, meeting the requirements of the ordinance. There's a 20-foot proposed right-of-way with 20 foot of paved improvement with a hammer-style turnaround that's been reviewed by the fire marshal, and his comments are attached in my packet as well. The area of the disturbance for the project will require state stormwater permits and sedimentation and erosion control permits. Those permits are provided to the planning department before any type of work could commence on the property. The wastewater is handled by 7 individual septic systems. Parking for cluster homes required at 1 space per bedroom. 50% of that parking has to be paved of an impervious surface. The site plan shows the required number of spaces. North Carolina Department of Transportation permits will be needed for the driveway access on the Old Main Road. A fire hydrant will need to be installed along the proposed road as well. The Dare County Planning Board reviewed this at their July 6th meeting and found the conditions of the special use permit reasonable and appropriate. And any further questions, the applicant and his attorney and project engineer here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one. Thank you, Noah. I have a question of the applicant.
You have questions of Noah? Does anyone have
No,
questions
not
for
of Noah. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Hang on, yeah.
Commissioner Ross has something and Vice Chairman has something.
No, are there any special use conditions to the buffers on both the north and the south side of this proposed? I see the site plan, and there is a vegetative buffer.
The ordinance doesn't require it. There's not any language in the special use permit or a draft condition that's there. I mean, you could include that in the special use permit, but it's not a requirement of the ordinance.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the site plan thinking if, again, I'm just pulling off the top of my head, like a sizable 10, 12-foot vegetative barrier. I've seen barriers of Russian olives that go 10, 12 feet when they grow, and they're impenetrable. It's like a wall.
Yes, sir.
So,
I mean, and again, it's not a requirement. In the past, we have on other cluster home projects have included language in the draft SUP or the special use permit for vegetation, but again, it's not a requirement of the ordinance.
okay.
Is that it, Commissioner Ross? Yes. Vice Chairman has.
Sorry, Noah. Just a question for clarification. Up in the initial verbiage of what we received, there's a statement in there that says something about the separation of the units being 24 feet, and then in subsequent, there's a number 8 down here that states something about 15 feet, and that 15 feet is mentioned in several of the other things that follow that. What is the?
The requirement of the ordinance is the dwellings are separated by 15 feet. He's increased that separation to 24, exceeding the requirements of the ordinance.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions of Norm? Okay. Come up to the mic, if you will, sir.
Commissioners, David Dixon from Hatteras Island. Mr. Gillum, and I am an attorney. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Stowe, the owner of the property.
Okay.
Mr. Gillum, have all the terms and conditions of the special use permit been met?
As far as the site plan goes, yes, sir.
Is there any other things that mean that the special use permit hasn't been met?
At this time, no, sir.
And so the vegetation that the commissioner had pointed out, that has been added even though it's not required.
Yes, sir.
And I believe was some extra parking added even though it's not required.
Yes, sir.
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, sir.
That's great. Any questions?
I do have 2 quick questions, if I might.
Please tell the board who you are and who you represent.
Yes, sir. My name is Krause Gray. I'm an attorney out of Kilo Hills. I represent Mr. and Mrs. James Coleman. They live just north of this project, right at the entranceway as you first come in. They were not able to attend because Mrs. Coleman has some health issues and her husband can't stay there. So,
Sir, would you speak into the mic? It's
Yeah, if
difficult
you
to
would,
hear
can you speak into the mic?
normally I'm too loud, so
That
I
ain't
apologize for that. 2 quick questions, if I might. One, you indicated that the square footage of this project was 68,963 square feet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what is the lot coverage based on 68,963 square feet as delineated on the site plan, if you remember?
He would be allowed up to 30%.
And it was something like 29.63% or something in that range.
Yes,
that he was at it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All
The
right.
site plan, I believe, says.
That's all I have at this stage.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr. Dixon, you have any?
Clarification question. So on this, do we have a 10-foot buffer on this site plan?
There, I believe there's the vegetative buffer would be the north and south property boundaries.
Okay.
When you say a 10-foot barrier, clarify that for me, if you would.
When you asked the question, I was under the impression they did not have a buffer of like for Russian olives and so forth.
Well, there's just some words of a vegetative barrier, and I think we need to know the specifics
Well,
of that.
and with one of my specifications, I think we need to have a large barrier like Russian olives there.
We'll speak to Mr. Stowe. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm kind of with you.
Okay.
Do we have a definition in other places in the ordinance for vegetative buffers that we could use as the definition here?
There's some zoning districts that have vegetative buffer language when a commercial use abuts a residential property, but again, not specifically in the R2A or in the cluster.
I understand, but I'm looking
What?
for.
Yeah. What
they're
is
looking-
that definition, though? Do you know?
Not off the top of
Okay.
my head, no, sir.
They're
I mean,
looking-
typically it's 5 feet of vegetation or some type of opaque screening, fencing, something of that nature.
Site plan indicates 5 feet.
Okay, so yeah, it shows a 5-foot vegetative buffer, Commissioner Ross. Okay.
It's okay. I'm gonna have to work this green button. I'm looking for that. Where is that designated, Danny?
Bottom on the south end of the
Yeah,
property,
so-
close to Old Main Road.
Any, I'll show you.
It's also on the northern property boundary.
I see vegetated buffer. Where's the 5 feet?
Same
It's a little bit of Where's Waldo. That 5 is kind of hidden in the diagram. I couldn't see it. Thank you, thank you, I see it now. So, where did the 5 feet come from?
That the applicant and Mr. Bissell proposed that on their own. That was,
I
again,
see, so if they proposed 10 feet, we could go with 10 feet, right, Mark?
I mean, I don't know if they could get 10 feet on the northern property line because that's where some of their stormwater infrastructure is going. Part of their right-of-ways there, part of the pavement for the road will be there.
10 feet height, Noah,
Oh,
not
10 feet
width.
height, not width.
I'm worried about height there. So the 5 feet is 5 feet width.
5 foot width.
Could
Yes,
be
sir.
could be a row of rose bushes on a 5-foot wide patch.
Yes, sir.
Oh, see, I was confused there, but I thought it was minimum height 5 feet. It's talking just the width of the,
If you have Russian olives, they're gonna be 5 foot wide, but they'll grow 10 foot high.
oh, I know that.
Yeah.
But again, I was a little confused because I thought that 5 was talking about the height of the required vegetative barrier, not the width of land that they would sit on. Okay.
The concern I have, I just want separation between the property and the neighbors.
I mean, he's got it shown on the site plan as proposed, a 5 foot width vegetative buffer, so.
No, just one other question regarding ingress and egress of an emergency vehicle.
Yes, sir.
I didn't see a way for them to turn around. That's not saying much.
Yeah, it's there, on the right-hand side.
On the east end of the property.
Just left of the filtration basin, there's a house and then a turnaround wall.
Right.
Adjacent to the last house.
Help him out.
In between the last house and next to the last house is a,
Oh, okay, I got you now. I got you. Yep, got it. Okay. So fire marshal signed off on that. Everything's cool there as far as he's concerned.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
any other questions?
Yeah, help me understand the buffer once again. Maybe I'm,
So the-
if we're talking 5 feet, is that when it's actually done, or is that the potential to get the 5 feet after it's been planted for so many years?
No,
How does that
it's 5
work?
feet wide, the
Wide.
space. The
Right.
height has not been determined at all.
Oh, I know that.
Could be a
But-
foot, could be 10.
But I'm saying when it's put in, is that 5 foot automatically there, or we gotta wait for it to?
Hold that question until the applicant comes up.
Okay.
Because he proposed it, we can ask him. what he
Okay,
intended.
all right. Sound like a plan. Anybody have any other questions of Noah? Thank you, Noah.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dixon, other evidence? All right, then if the applicant would come forward.
Mr. Bissell.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We think that,
Who are you, sir?
I'm Mark Bissell, and I'm an engineer, and I represent Mr. Stowe. We think that this project is an appropriate use and appropriate density for the site. It has adequate access from the existing road. It has greater than 120 feet of width at the west end. It has, if you look at the setting, there are, on the north side, within the same length of roadway, there are 6 existing lots. On the south side, on the same length of roadway, there are 8 existing lots, and we're proposing 7 units, which is kind of right in between. So it's roughly the same density as the adjacent development on both sides. From a traffic standpoint, DOT figures 10 trips per day for a standard single-family home. These are only 2-bedroom homes. But even if you do have the full 10 trips, when you spread those out over a typical 12-hour day, you've got maybe 1 trip for 10 or 11 minutes. So traffic's not an issue. We did provide a visitor parking space for each of those units. I know that was raised as a concern, so that there won't be parking blocking the road. There's adequate water for firefighting. This property is only about a couple of blocks from the existing elevated tank, so there's plenty of water for fighting fires. There's a 20-foot paved road being proposed with a fire truck turnaround that's designed in accordance with the North Carolina Fire Code. We have provided a bed-type wastewater system for each unit so that so you have adequate wastewater treatment done in as small a footprint as possible, which allows some preservation of vegetation behind the units, between the backs of the units and the property lines. The project does meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance of section 22-31.1. All of the special use permits, as Noah indicated, have been met. And they're all reasonable and in appropriate conditions. And we are providing buffers. Now, on the north side, there's, just because of the site configuration, there's about 10 feet, there is 10 feet, in fact, available between the edge of the pavement and the north property line. And what we have done is design the road so that all the drainage is to the south. It will go into a collector swale there. So on the north side, you've got a 5-foot shoulder for the road, and the water line will be within that shoulder. And then there's the ability to have a 5-foot planting buffer. And the applicant is willing to plant.
Help me out on that one.
And he's willing to plant a row of Russian olives within that 5-foot buffer.
What does the 2W, I'm just clarifying here, 2WL, it's repeated all the way across the north line.
That's a 2-inch water line. There's a.
I'm learning the code for reading these things, so thank you.
Gotta be an engineer.
Yeah, I didn't know what it meant, but thank you, Mark. I got it.
So there's an 8-inch water line proposed that comes into the site up to the location of a proposed fire hydrant.
8 inch.
Right.
That will serve. Yes, that will serve. So there's a fire hydrant there that will provide fire protection for the development. And then once you get beyond that hydrant, the water line reduces to 2-inch because it's just providing domestic service at that point.
Excuse me, now with the hydrant that you show on the site map that we have here, the fire marshal had actually asked for it to be moved 37 feet further into it. Is that?
Yeah, I believe it's the plan that you're seeing shows it reflects that it has been moved.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they gave us a plan that didn't reflect that. Yeah.
On the conditions.
On the conditions, and also in the fire marshal's report.
Right.
He had specified it to be moved 37 feet into the development prior to, according to the site plan that he was looking at.
This site plan, you say, reflects that change.
I believe it does, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It reflects that.
And that was to make sure that the corner of every building is within 400 feet of the fire hydrant.
Mr. Bissell, something was mentioned earlier about stormwater runoff, and it was, I think I read something in the verbiage there which said all of that was, it was designed to be contained on site.
It is.
And is that the proposed infiltration basin? Is that to carry that water?
That's right. So we're collecting water from the homes and from the roadway and running it to a proposed infiltration basin on the east end of the site, which will be more than adequate to meet the requirements for stormwater management for the site.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to confirm that about the barrier. So both north and south vegetative barriers could be specified to be Russian olives, which again I know grow to 8, 9, 10 feet and are extraordinarily dense and protective in terms of separating one side from the other.
Yes.
That's a question.
Well, Yes, certainly on the north side. On the south side, we were hoping to preserve existing vegetation to the greatest degree possible, but if we can't, then I would say a Russian olive barrier there would be appropriate too.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Bissell.
Hang on, Mr. Bissell. Mr. Gray, any questions? I'm sorry, Dave, any questions? Do you have questions for him?
I do.
Okay.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Bissell, what qualifications are licensed?
Come up to the mic, if you will, sir.
Mr. Bissell, what qualifications or licenses do you have?
I'm a registered professional engineer in North Carolina.
And how long have you been doing this?
I've been practicing since 1984, I believe.
And you've familiarized yourself with this special use permit and the requirements?
I have.
And have all the terms and conditions of the special use permit been met?
The conditions all have been met or will be met before the project goes to record.
Yeah, okay, thanks, guys. We can barely hear you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's helpful when we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hold on, Mr. Bissell. You have any questions?
Just a couple, please.
Once again, step up to the mic, please.
Again, my name is Krause Gray. Mr. Bissell, the stormwater retention pond, have you done the calculations as to how much that will, in fact, be able to hold?
We have done some rough calculations and believe that it's in excess of the requirements. The final will be done with the final grading plan when we apply to the state for an actual permit.
So the actual amount that it will hold, you don't know yet?
Not yet.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
The stormwater plan, though, is a state requirement, and before you can get your
Permit.
permit, you have to get that stormwater permit from the state, correct?
Right, that is one of the conditions that's been proposed as
Correct.
part of the special use permit.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Bissell.
Thank you.
Mr. Dixon, any other evidence to present?
We'd ask Mr. Stowe.
Sure.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Morning. David Stowe, proposing to build this cluster house project. What you got, Dave?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some questions we might have you over.
Yes, sir.
I'll kick it off, Mr. Stowe. One of the ordinances in section 22.31.1 talks about long-term occupancy, and it's defined in the county zoning ordinance as a residential dwelling that's occupied and used for residency and housekeeping purposes for a period of 31 days or more. My question to you is, rather than short-term rentals, would you consider extending that to 1 year as a rental requirement on your property? We've asked other developers that's done something similar, and they have agreed to do that. Would you be willing to agree not to accept the 31 days, which is all that's required? But my question is, would you be willing to require a 1-year lease?
My experience with having rental homes and stuff is that obviously it'd be better for long-term. I mean, I don't want somebody going in and out every 30 days. I mean, the longer they stay, the better. My experience is the people I've had renting from me, most of the people I've had when I build a project or something, some of them are still staying with me unless they've done better for themselves. So, yes.
So the answer to that is yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions of the applicant, Mr. Couch?
Good morning,
Commissioner
David.
Couch.
The spirit of central workforce when we were developing this was making things available for law enforcement, for medical professionals, for school teachers, we've got several hundred rental cottages in Avon. Avon is the niche for vacation homes, and somebody's got to service and clean these things. Can I ask you, it's your intent to provide essential housing for people in the labor force?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So to piggyback on that, roughly, can you tell me roughly what you'd be charging for rent? Could the average guy afford this place?
Probably around $1,500 a month.
Okay, so market price.
Yes, sir.
Would you have a problem putting a buffer on the south side?
There's a lot of vegetation there already, and the intent is to leave all the trees and stuff that are there to, if we put something different, we'd have to tear all that out to do that. There are some places where it's bare. We'd be willing to, in those bare spots, put something, but I think that the vegetation's already there would be larger than what we could put in there.
I personally would like to see some vegetation where it's bare,
Absolutely.
if that's possible.
Yeah, I think Mr. Bissell pointed that out in his testimony, that the applicant would be willing to do that. They'd like to use what's existing, but if there's bare spots, he'll fill it in.
And that would add the taller vegetation on the north side. I think Mr. Bissell said that would be doable
Yes.
in
Yes.
preserving what vegetation is on the south side.
Anywhere where there's not vegetation already, we would want to fill it in.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else?
So
I've got one other quick question. One of the comments made was this project would make the area less safe. Is there any reason to believe that building this 7-home cluster home would make the area less safe?
None whatsoever. The quality of what we're going to build would be, I would say, be an enhancement to the area. I owned another piece of property adjacent to this property before, and when I bought it, it was had a hole in the roof, and the roof was caving in, and we went in there and refurbished the whole house, and as far as I'm concerned, we did better for the neighborhood, and we'll do the same with these projects as well.
Thank you.
I had one more question, too. During public comment, one of the speakers said you could have 10 vehicles when they come for visits, or someone comes to visit and there's a party or gathering, and they'd be all over the street and everything. I'm looking back at Mr. Bissell. Are there requirements in here that prohibit parking on the street?
Well, the requirements that we had were, yes, there's not to be any parking on the street.
Ah, okay.
And we were allotted by the law to have 2 spots, but we was questioned in the meeting we had back last month about the possibility of adding an additional parking place, and we did that.
So the concern of 10 vehicles really is not a concern because it's already prohibited?
If somebody would do it, they'd be breaking the law.
Gotcha, thank you.
I wouldn't think it'd be any different on the houses on both sides, that you could accumulate 10 houses or 10 people coming to your home as well.
Gotcha.
County Manager?
Yes, sir. So you would consent to a modification of the special use permit as proposed to use Russian olives to create a 5-foot buffer on the north line, use Russian olives to create buffers to any any bare areas along the natural vegetation line in the south, and you would agree to limit that there'd be no rentals for less than 1-year terms.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions of the applicant?
I may, after the motion is made, if there's going to be one.
No, you have to take
You have
the
to do it
evidence
now.
now.
Okay.
You have to do it now.
This is ripping me up a little bit, particularly with, there is a health issue of somebody who's beloved in that community. I know everybody on both sides of on Avalana and Kitty. Nevertheless, just like we saw the clerk take the oath, I took an oath to uphold the laws of the Constitution, to uphold the laws of North Carolina, and therefore that's going to have to be I'm going to have to uphold my oath.
Hang on, you don't, until all the evidence is in, you haven't made up your mind.
All right,
yet.
that's
So
why I
wait
wanted to
until
wait. Okay.
They complete their evidence, wait until Mr. Gray completes whatever evidence he may want to put on, and then when we close the evidence, you have the opportunity to determine where that led you.
Understood.
You folks have any more questions of the applicant?
Not of the applicant, no, sir.
Mr. Dixon, any more evidence to present? No. All right, with that, we will close that portion. Mr. Gray, if you have evidence to present?
Good morning, sir. State your name.
Good morning. My name is Ray Meekins. I live in Manteo at 109 Broughton Street. I have a land surveying business, Seaboard Surveying and Planning in Nags Head. My parents were born and raised in the village of Avon, along with our ancestors for many generations. Their graves are scattered all through the village and about every cemetery there. Recently, I've been coming down often on weekends to visit good friends who live adjacent to the north side of Mr. Stowe's property, who are in a really rough time in their life. And it's for them, as well as the other 14 property owners who surround this property to be developed, that I stand before you in opposition to this plan. In 2021, my firm was asked to survey the property in order to subdivide it, and we were successful in getting a 4-lot division approved. But my client decided to change plans and revised the division to a 2-lot version with a lot on either side of the canal, which was approved and recorded. Mr. Stowe later purchased the parcel known as Lot 1. It's those maps that my firm produced that have been copied according to one of the disclaimer notes on the submitted conceptual site plan that is before you today. Lucky for the applicant, I was working under the county subdivision ordinance, which requires a great deal of detail rather than the cluster home ordinance, or they would not have anything to copy for their submittal. It's interesting to compare the subdivision ordinance with the process this board has created for the approval of these cluster home developments in order to facilitate greater housing stock in Dare County. Instead of the 12 or so pages of requirements one has to meet for the subdivision of land for the purpose of sale within that ordinance, requirements most likely drafted by the North Carolina Institute of Government for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. This board has carved out this cluster home ordinance having only 12 items as the requirements that barely fill a single page. I understand that these two ordinances are completely separate and apart from one another, but the subdivision ordinance and the cluster home ordinance do overlap in function regarding regulating the division of land and the requirements for new streets. Except cluster homes do not have all the appropriate reviews, requirements, and safeguards listing in the subdivision ordinance. Noteworthy as well is the fact that in the subdivision ordinance there's the optional sketch plan submittal prior to preliminary plat approval. The conceptual site plan submitted by the applicant would most certainly fall into this category by that ordinance, and you wouldn't get vested rights with a sketch plan, only upon approval of the preliminary plat. It appears in the cluster home ordinance a submittal of any type of drawing is sufficient to get vested. It's my opinion that there should be a balance between the desires of the development community and the safeguards required for the public good, and in this cluster home ordinance is tilted heavily towards the developers. But luckily, the board has given themselves the option in the last paragraph of the ordinance to apply other reasonable and appropriate conditions to reflect individual specific site conditions which may be applied to cluster home development as part of the special use review and approval process, and it's my hope that this board takes that statement to heart in this instant. For the following reasons, I ask this project be denied or at least tabled. Number one, lack of an up-to-date survey with basic facts and existing conditions in order for a sound decision to be made. Number two, lack of any engineering data concerning stormwater measures to prevent runoff onto adjacent properties along the north side, with calculations showing the amount of fill to be required. Three, omission of an existing guy wire along right-of-way of Old Main Road, as shown on the plat by Seaboard Surveying of Record, clearly visible if one would actually go on site and look, which would end up within the paved roadway shown on this sketch. Number four, the depiction of the stormwater basin top of bank running directly through the septic repair areas, where there are state regulations requiring up to a 25-foot setback between the two. I've verified this with the local health department. When corrected on the site plan, what's that going to do to the amount of stormwater storage available for the impervious coverage proposed? Number five, the 5-foot buffers along the sidelines are completely inadequate, in my view. As I understand it, after completely denuding the lot of all life forms, grading and infrastructure installed, there might be some sort of buffer laid down upon the outer 5 feet, which could be grasses, flowers, etc. Seems reasonable to require the applicant come back with a meaningful buffering plan, at least 10 feet in width, using the natural vegetation in place and adding to that when necessary to create a solid opaque buffer. Number six, a traffic study should be required. Old Main Road is only a 30-foot right-of-way and a 20-foot wide pavement. There are currently 32 developed lots along this roadway and another 24 undeveloped, for a total of 56 on the books already. This needs to be considered. In closing, it's my opinion that this plan is just a sketch lacking any specifics or details and with no professional seal on it to take credit for it. How can you make a proper informed decision with only a conceptual plan? I respectfully request that you send it back to the applicant in exchange for an amended detailed plan and have them make an actual investment in surveying, engineering, and planning to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents being affected. By the way, and peer review by a contracted engineer should be considered for all submittals regarding land use matters depicting engineering, as most all other municipalities have in place. And by the way, the property would make a great and much needed aerial burn park, urn burial park, excuse me, with minimal clearing required if only the applicant would give this idea time to come to fruition before bringing in the dozers. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple questions first?
Yes, go ahead. I have questions too.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Meekin, you have looked at the site plan as presented and you've given your opinion on what it is. Is there anything in that site plan that would lead you to believe that it does not meet the conditions of the Dare County ordinances?
May I ask some questions that may respond to that question that you're asking?
Sure. That's all. I just want to know, does it comply or not in his opinion?
Well, I'm not an engineer, first off. But since I didn't see a seal on it, I just made some general comments.
So you don't know whether it complies or not? Is that what you're telling me?
I believe it does.
It does, okay.
That's what I was basically going to pursue, because I heard quite a bit of statements about the lack of validity, but now you've said it does comply. So I'm confused. Which one is it?
The second question, the second question I had, you talked about the stormwater. The stormwater, you're aware that's a state permit, correct?
Correct.
And the things that you described, the state will have to approve whatever they do, correct?
I'm just saying it's represented as.
Right, and they'll have to have, and that comes typically later, prior to the issuance of the building permit, correct? And that's what's conditioned in the permit.
I assume so, yes, sir.
So the state will address the concerns that you raised, presumably to meet the requirements of the state stormwater code.
So, yes.
Okay, correct. Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Do you have anything else, Commissioner Ross?
Number 3, I was trying to keep in mind each of the 6, I think it was 6 conditions you said made this non-approvable. What was number 3 again?
Something about.
Omission of the existing guy wire along the right-of-way of Old Main.
Yeah, I don't know what a guy wire along the roadway was. That caught my attention. Is there a problem there technically, engineering-wise,
Well,
legally?
there's a power pole just south of that guy wire.
Okay,
I mean, yeah, the guy wires, and it's an angle point in the line. Those guy wires hold that pole in place,
Rob,
and they're necessary,
Oh, and those-
infrastructure.
got it now. Thank
There's
you.
an easement associated with them,
So this is
either prescriptive
violating,
or non-prescriptive.
so it's going to put in jeopardy a power line? And that's been overlooked, Mr. Bissell? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I'm saying if you look at our survey plat that he's copied, there's a symbol for a guy wire right next to a concrete stone where the road makes an angle. And if you go on site, you can see the guy wire coming down into the woods.
Okay, and,
If you superimpose the plan upon the earth, that guy wire is in the street that they're proposing.
okay, now I understand.
So it has to move. But what has been, I don't see anything that addresses that. Are they going to move the pole? Are they going to make it a self-supporting pole? Or are they going to cut the wire loose and hope it stays, the pole? I don't know what the plan is. I'm just bringing it up.
The applicant's engineer proposed to address that? Are you available to address that?
Hang on, we'll come back and let's let,
All right, look, we'll get it all out.
yeah.
Okay. Is there any other?
Mr. Dixon, do you have any questions? Or, I'm sorry, are you? I have some questions. Well, if you finish presenting your evidence, and then we'll ask questions.
Right.
Go ahead.
Ray, you previously prepared a plat of this property you testified to earlier, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a copy of that plat is recorded in Plat Cabinet J, slide 290, Dare County Public Registry. Is that also correct?
Yes.
And on that plat, you showed that the total square footage of this tract, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you also show what the square footage of the actual land is?
Yes.
All right, what is the square footage of the land, if you can read that?
Plus or minus 67,493 square feet.
All right. Now, when we say land, that's because this property does include a canal, correct?
Yes. We set the division line between lots 1 and 2 along the proximate center of the canal.
All right, and this canal we're talking about, it extends and goes all the way to the sound, correct?
Yes.
And it's accessible from the sound to come into this property, correct?
It appears that way through aerial photography, yes, sir.
All right, sir. When you reviewed the site plan that is before this board, did you note any type of building pad or driveway or anything that is south of the 30-foot by 30-foot building pads?
Any hard infrastructure proposed, like a driveway, you said?
Yes.
No, I did not.
All right. That's my only questions at this stage.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dixon, any questions?
No.
Any other evidence?
No, that is the only evidence we'll be presenting. I would like to make an argument, if I might, to the board when it becomes the appropriate time.
Do you have questions for either the applicant or for Mr. Meekins?
I have a question of the engineer of the applicant with respects to that guide wire issue. Is that something that can be remedied?
Mr. Chairman, we routinely work with the power company to either relocate guy wires or shore them up or use a different type of guy wire in order to secure a power pole. We have a project, in fact, under construction in Moyoc right now where they're using a different, replacing an existing guy wire with a different type to allow a multi-use path to pass underneath that. So this is not an issue that is going to be a problem.
I might can help a little bit. I wrote 2 proposed conditions to address the concerns that were raised.
Right, that's
the
correct.
applicant would consent to those
Right.
conditions, then 2 issues would be resolved anyway. One is conditioned upon the applicant ensuring the stability of the pole that was in question, so that what they would routinely do now becomes a condition of the permit, so that won't be an issue. And the second would be conditioned upon having an engineer or someone with a sealed plan to verify the lot coverage, so that we don't have a lot coverage issue if we have a sealed plan to verify that lot coverage. And that would address the 2 major concerns that just came up, and they would be included as conditions in our permit if the applicant would consent to those.
There's already conditions in the special use permit addressing an as-built survey being submitted that would address lot coverage.
An as-built, but I'm talking about what are you going to do when we get to the end and it's wrong? They can tear it down.
That would be to the applicant.
Yeah, okay.
To adjust it because he wouldn't.
Okay, so that's a.
So the survey will be presented before we start moving dirt?
No,
And the
he's
survey,
He's saying it's after, and if he's wrong, he's got to tear down part of the building.
oh, okay.
Right.
That's our routine practice for any type of development that we do. Anybody that builds a house, any type of development, they submit an as-built before a certificate of
Yeah,
occupancy.
Mr. Meekins or one of the other firms would come in and present the survey with the calculations on it to get the CO.
Okay.
So they would be bound by that already.
No, that doesn't, can I speak? No, that doesn't, he's not limited to having to tear part of the structure down. That could be impervious surface. There are other options to deal with coverage
Yes, sir.
violations.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
But he can't get a CO if he doesn't meet the requirements.
Right. How about will the state stormwater application address the issue that was proposed about, and I'm gonna have this wrong, I know, but there was a concern about the storm water running through, what was that again?
Septic repair.
Septic repair area. Will the state permit address that concern?
It will, and this swale is not proposed to have standing water in it. Plus, we've done some preliminary calculations on the area that has been set aside for stormwater infiltration, and it appears that based on the impervious coverage that's being proposed, it would be able to store on the order of 4 inches of rainfall, where the state requires 1.5 inches.
You have to get a stormwater permit. You also have to get your septic or your sewer permits as well, and they are in conjunction. One works with the other, correct?
Correct. And we're
Put your
coordinating this with the
infiltration
health
basin on your drain
department.
field or vice versa.
And so far, the health department doesn't have any objection to what we're proposing.
Mark, does this address, I guess, a 100-year storm? What the requirements you'll have to meet?
Well, the 100-year storm would be probably a 6-inch rainfall. We would be addressing something on the order of a 25-year storm, would be my guess.
So the state requires a 45-year storm?
The state only requires 1.5 inches
Okay.
of runoff, which is about a 2-year storm. So we'll be substantially improving on what the state requires.
And I guess the as-built survey would take care of the guide wires issue also with the NC Power?
It will.
All right, any other questions by board members? Does that complete the public hearing, County Manager?
Any other evidence, Mr. Dixon?
No.
Any other questions, Mr. Gray?
No more questions.
Any more evidence by either of you all?
No, sir.
Is there anyone else who'd like to present evidence this morning? there's no other evidence, so yes, that would then conclude the public hearing, or the hearing.
Yes.
I would like to make comments if I have an opportunity.
So if they want to argue or make rebuttal, they can.
Yeah.
Here's the concern that I have that's in front of you, and I'm going to only cover two. I know stormwater is something that we talked about, but to be candid, I have to agree. It's just in his earlier presentation, he made a presentation, Mr. Bissell, that we meet stormwater, and I just want to make it clear, no, they don't at this stage. But that'll come later. I understand that. And also, as a practical, I'm in a rare circumstance. I normally represent developers, so it is unusual for me to be sitting up here or standing up here before you trying to say, let's not do something. But the burden is on the applicant. The applicant has to prove to you that they met the requirements of the ordinance. That's their burden. Once they meet that burden, then the burden shifts to me to show that there's some issues. And I'm going to present two issues to you. The first is lot coverage. You heard testimony that the survey that was prepared by Mr. Meekins clearly shows that the amount of land is approximately, and I'm using round numbers, 1,500 square feet less than. And I did the calculation of if we take 1,500 square feet off of the land, that gets us down to 67,493 square feet, and divide that by their impervious surface, that's 20,640 square feet. Simple math, that says they're at 30.58% lot coverage. Remember, the burden is on them to demonstrate to you that they meet their ordinance. If you don't include land underwater, they don't meet the ordinance. An analogy is if we have a sound front lot or an ocean front lot. We got lots of those in Dare County that are platted. They don't even exist anymore, some of them. You can't build on them because the land is under the water. I think this board knows that that canal was not dug by Mr. Stowe or his predecessors in title. That canal was dug by the state. And therefore, there is an issue as to who owns the land under the water. And I was waiting for them to address that with you, but they didn't. They left it out here. The testimony you heard is that that canal goes all the way to the sound. It's accessible. I'm not giving testimony, but I lived in Avon as a young child, and I used to take a canoe down that. Basically, I came from the sound all the way to the other end of it. It's a different route I went. My point is it's navigable, and what constitutes navigable water is waters that primarily are owned by the state. If that's the case, and I'm not certifying that it is, that's their burden to present. And during the evidentiary hearing, and I made it clear what I was trying to get to, it wasn't like I was hiding anything, they don't meet the requirements of less than 30% or less lot coverage. And as such, this plan before you, even though a sketch, should be denied. The second issue that I want to address with you is parking. If you would, for me, if you go to page 21 of your package, it's the one that shows what the second floor plan looks like and what the first floor plan looks like. And it shows the cars. Your ordinance, 22-56, talks about number of spaces.
The number of off-street parking spaces required by this section shall be provided on the same lot with principal use, except as provided in subsection J of section 22-54, and the required number of off-street spaces specified for use shall be considered as the absolute minimum. My point is, your own ordinance says you can require more. Your ordinance was drafted, I believe, at some point in time when you were talking about lots, subdivision lots. When somebody comes to visit you, what do? They park in your driveway. Now, let's take a quick look at the plan that you have. Okay? If you look at that plan, we have building pads, 30 foot by 30 foot. And we have a little teeny bit of space between that building pad and the road right-of-way. I scaled it off and it came to about 7 or 8 feet. I couldn't get it scaled properly, so I can't tell you the exact number, and I'm not testifying anyways, but you can look at it and see that it's less than 10 feet. Now remember, your building requirements are that each parking space has to be 10 feet by 20 feet. I previously asked you to look at page 21 so that you can see how they're trying to get around the issue of where are people going to park. And what they've shown is out of the 30-foot space, you fit a car. They're proposing that a car back up. And how many times when somebody comes to visit you are you actually going to back your vehicle up so they can park in your driveway, particularly if you didn't know they were coming? And remember, I asked Mr. Meekins if there was any evidence, as shown on their site plan, that they were putting some impervious surface to the south of the building pads. In other words, that car is backing up. It's going to go back to what? Onto the sand? And my assumption is these are probably going to be concrete pads underneath.
I'm trying to follow what you're saying. You've lost me.
It shows gravel on the plan.
It shows gravel.
I don't know what you're saying.
Gravel underneath. I apologize.
Shows gravel on the plan. Or concrete. Or it could be pervious. I don't know, it's not.
What I'm trying to indicate, sir, and I apologize, I'm not making myself clear. If you look on page 21, you'll see that their proposal for additional parking puts the car south. And they're trying to put another one in.
What is the point that you're saying? They can't park there? There's too much parking? There's not enough?
There's not enough parking that the tail end of the car is going to go into the road right away.
So the car is going to be parked on the road?
That's where it's going to have to be.
Why?
Why?
Because there's not enough room. You have a 20-foot requirement.
But
you don't have 40 feet from the south edge of that 30-foot thing all the way to the road right away. It doesn't exist.
How many parking places are they required to have?
It says two.
Okay, so have they?
That's the minimum.
Right, but the two they,
Doesn't say
but
you
the,
can't require
are the
more.
two they have sufficient? If they didn't have the third, is it sufficient? Does it meet the code? If they have two, are the dimensions?
Code says to repeat the language.
I'm talking about dimensionally. Do they, if the board said we only have to have two, do two places dimensionally meet the standard that you're applying?
No.
They do, so you couldn't do two places.
Well, they can do two side by side.
Correct.
They can do that. It's
Right.
when you add the third one,
It's
there's
not
not
required.
enough room.
If they add the third one, it's not required unless they add something to the rear. Gravel or some
They gotta do
impervious,
something.
some pervious surface.
To add it in there, that's absolutely correct.
If they're required to have three, which they're not required yet.
They're not required yet, but the board could require it.
Okay.
And my point being more, when you look at this development, how tight it is. This isn't like a single-family residential lot where you have a driveway where people can go on to. There's no excess room here. And as such, the back end of that car is going to be out into the road right away. And I know you have signage saying you can't park in the road right away. I'm sorry. I live in a development that has signs saying that, and guess what? People park in the road right away. I would respectfully request two things. One, that you frankly deny, simply because they had the burden of proof and they haven't met it on lot coverage. Two, if you decide to go forward, that you do in fact add the things that you previously talked about, but also you have to look at realistically, how is somebody going to park here other than the 2 spaces? And the answer is there isn't any other way. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll be very brief. I find a lot of what Mr. Gray said to be very interesting when he's talking about the literal rights, or what's sometimes misspoken as riparian rights and the rest of it. But when you look down at what we've got here, I asked a question of Mr. Gillum. Have all the terms and conditions of the special use permit been met? And he answered yes. I asked a licensed engineer, Mr. Bissell, have all the terms and conditions of a special use permit been met? And he answered yes. And then, most surprisingly, when Mr. Outen asked Mr. Gray's witness the same question, he said, I believe it does. So that is what we have before us. And the issue of the vegetation and the extra parking space and all of the accommodations, the 1 year that we're going to allow people to have a place to live who is actually working on the island. So I'd ask you to go ahead and approve this as I believe the law requires. Thank you very much.
I've got a question of Mr. Bissell. I have tried to scale this. I've looked at the scale on this plat that we have. Marked it off with a little pencil in there. Can you give me the distance? Matter of fact, let's pull it up on the screen. Slide, what was it, 22, that was brought to our attention. Slide 22. We don't have any way of doing it. Mr. Bissell, do you have that? Do you have a copy of that?
I do.
What is the distance? And I'm looking straight onto this. Is the top of that sketch the front of the home?
It is.
All right. Is the bottom of that sketch the rear of the home?
Well, actually,
Where the vehicle on the left is shown?
actually the top of the sketch is the back.
All right.
The bottom of the plan shows the front of the house.
All right, okay, all right, I got you. What is the distance from that piling at the bottom of that sketch to the road? What is the distance? I've tried to measure it on there and I can't measure it. I'm questioning his distance. How many feet
I believe it's 10 feet.
It's 10 feet from the piling to the road?
Yes.
What is the distance from the top of that to the next road? From that piling to the next road? There's not a road? There's not a road back there?
Yeah, we've got.
It's got to be a road. There's lots all along there.
What we're showing is that from the edge of the pavement of the proposed road to the back of the second parking space is 45 feet. And from the right-of-way to the back of that second parking space is 40 feet. So you have two full 20-foot parking spaces in there. And let me just add that, you know, the sketch is showing 3 parking spaces, but there's technically enough room for 4 parking spaces under each house.
Because you could do the same thing on the right side.
Exactly.
That you've done on the left side.
Exactly.
Correct?
That's right.
Okay.
I got a question, Mark. So he hit me with the lot coverage issue, taking the water in consideration with the lot coverage. How do you address that?
If the numbers that Mr. Gray threw out are correct, that amounts to something less than 400 square feet of available coverage, and that can be addressed through a simple plan modification.
The permit's already conditioned on them meeting that lot coverage requirement.
Right.
So they get, that's already required of them.
Well, I'm just, you know, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and the evidence says that he does not meet the existing.
No, the evidence didn't say that. The evidence
Well,
said hypothetically, they might not if the water in the canal is considered part of the plat.
That's right.
Which is unclear to me.
But he can't get a CO.
Well, let me ask you this, do we consider the water to be land that he owns?
I wouldn't know without somebody surveying it and talking about what the easements are and all that, nor does Mr. Gray. That's why he couldn't tell you that either.
He's got to get that done.
Nobody's done that work. But the issue before you is there are a number of permits that have, and a number of conditions that have to be met.
Right.
So to issue your special use permit, he either has to meet those conditions or you have to be conditioned upon meeting those conditions. And if he's done one or the other, then before he can get a CO, every condition in your special use permit has to be complied with, or he can't get the CO. If in fact Mr. Gray was correct, then before they got the CO, they would have to create, what'd you say it was, 400 square feet? 400 square feet of impervious surface somewhere, or I'm sorry, pervious surface somewhere where they now have impervious surface. So they'd have to, you know, make the fire truck turn around gravel or something. I'm just, whatever, but that is pretty much done in every special use permit you've issued.
Right.
Okay. So, but what you're really saying for this board is basically speaking, we have no right to legally deny this based on his statement that it does not meet the 30% or less lot coverage.
Actually, the evidence that you have before you is it meets all conditions of the ordinances, which would include lot coverage. He's speculating that it does not.
Yeah, there's no evidence that it does not.
He didn't present you the survey either.
No, sir.
So we'll have to wait till the as-built survey, and then they have to even go for a variance or whatever they got to do to make it work.
That's right.
Which is, again, what just about every development.
But when I get to my agenda item, I'm going to address some of these things we're going to talk about later on, but
Yeah, okay.
I don't want to hold everybody up.
Anything else? County Manager?
I have nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Bissell.
Thank you.
That brings us to, let me scroll back up here. That brings us to see what the pleasure of the board is concerning a motion to draft an SUP and site plan concerning the William David Stowe Cluster Home Development Special Use Permit. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move that the SUP number 5-2023 and associated site plan for the proposed cluster home group development be approved.
Okay. There is a.
I'll second it.
Who seconded it?
Jim.
Thank you, Jim. There's a motion on the floor by the vice chairman. It's been seconded by Commissioner Tobin. County manager has a question.
We need to add to that motion the conditions.
The conditions, that's right.
One, that Russian olives be used to create the 5-foot buffer along the northern line, and that Russian olives be used to create a buffer along the southern line where there is no naturally occurring buffer, and then condition on the applicant ensuring the stability of the pole. And I don't remember which corner it was on, but whatever the northeast corner, whatever that corner is, be added as a condition as well.
The other condition was extending a 1-year lease.
And then extending the lease term to 1 year.
So did the maker of the motion has agreed to that? Jim, the second, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, I think you had another second by somebody here, maybe. I hope you did. If we could get another second.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Ross. All right, the floor is open for additional comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
No, we've taken the R2A out of the cluster home ordinance, that's correct? Yes, sir. On Hatteras Island? Yes, sir. All right, that's the majority zoning condition, well, R1 is actually. Is there any foreseeable projects? We don't have any foreseeable cluster home projects. They'll never be able to make something based on the recension of that ordinance on Hatteras Island?
Not in this zoning district.
All right, so this is the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
To expand on that, Noah, is there any other projects coming front in Dare County as a whole?
For cluster homes, currently, not that I'm aware of, no, sir. I mean, there's still the opportunity in the 8 or 10 districts that it remains in, but.
Okay.
Isn't there one in Mans Harbor?
That was approved, I believe, 2 months ago, yes, sir?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. Hearing none, those in favor of the motion before you signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. County Manager, I'm going to call for a 5-minute break. We'll call the Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting back to order and turn it over to County Manager.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item 7 on the amendment. This is a proclamation for Child Support Awareness Month, and with the Chairman's permission, I'll read the proclamation.
Yes, sir.
Whereas Dare County is recognizing August as Child Support Awareness Month and reaffirms its commitment to strengthening Dare County families by providing child support services to improve the economic stability and well-being of children. And whereas in the state fiscal year 2022-23, more than $2.2 million in child support was collected from parents of Dare County children. And whereas there are nearly 731 child support orders in place, working to ensure that more than 791 children receive financial support from their parents. And whereas the court must order either parent to obtain and maintain medical health insurance coverage for a child if it is actually and currently available to the parent at a reasonable cost. And whereas Child Support Awareness Month salutes the diligent working parents who spend time with their child and who make regular child support payments to safeguard their children's future. And whereas strengthening individuals and families promotes the safety and well-being of children, provides stability, improves the lives of children, and provides opportunities for families to be able to enhance their children's futures. And whereas children who do not receive adequate financial and emotional support from their parents may experience greater difficulty in becoming healthy, happy, and productive citizens. And whereas many concerned and dedicated judges, district attorneys, clerks of court, sheriff's personnel, and child support professionals work to establish and enforce child support orders for Dare County children, one of our county's most vital resources. Now, therefore, the Dare County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim August 2023 as Child Support Awareness Month in Dare County and commend its observance to all citizens this the 7th day of August 2023.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Couch. It's been seconded by Vice Chairman. Commissioner Toman, you're back with us, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
That brings us to item 8, and this is a Saving Life Task Force and Human Health and Services Overdose Awareness Month proclamation, and Roxanna Ballinger is here for that.
Welcome back, Roxanne.
Thank you. August is Overdose Awareness Month, and fentanyl prevention and overdose awareness is actually August 21st of this month. So I'd like to read the proclamation. Whereas overdose is the leading cause of death for people age 18 to 45 in the United States today. So that's a pretty heavy statement right there. It now exceeds suicide, gun violence, and car accidents. Whereas many lives are changed and impacted by drug overdose, including family, friends, caregivers, people working in healthcare and support services, and first responders who often assume the role of lifesavers. Whereas due to the unfair stigma attached to drug use, those individuals grieving the loss of a loved one due to an overdose must often bear the burden of their loss alone. Whereas Dare County would like to continue to raise greater awareness of the overdose crisis, recognize those in our community who are impacted by the crisis and doing essential work to prevent more fatalities. Whereas Dare County would like to dedicate a month to recognize those lives who are impacted by the overdose crisis. Therefore, we ask that Dare County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim the month of August 2023 as Overdose Awareness Month and call upon the people of Dare County to observe this month by helping their families, friends, neighbors, co-workers, and leaders better understand the importance of overdose awareness the 7th day of August, 2023.
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by the Vice Chairman to approve the proclamation as presented. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Roxanne.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item 9 on the agenda. Bill Coleman's here for the Outer Banks SPCA, and this is a request that was made by Commissioner Ross, and so I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ross.
Thank you, County Manager. This one, I think, will be fairly brief. I've spoken to some of you offline. What we have is a terrific addition to the SPCA shelter. Come on up to the mic, Bill. I may ask you to fill in any blanks that I have. We've retained the services of a superb veterinarian. Her name escapes me, but she is going to start soon or has started.
She has started.
She has started. She is a retired veterinarian, highly recognized and well admired in her profession. She will be able to provide the much needed services on site at our shelter on a couple of days a week that she'll be working with us.
Correct.
And that we have a history of minor but necessary surgical procedures that the shelter conducts and has to then go through local veterinarians, which again entail the paying for those services that our new on-site or shelter veterinarian could easily accomplish if she had a sufficiently prepared surgical room in order to do so. And I will look at Mr. Coleman and thank him for vacating his office so that this space will now be converted to the new surgical room. And in our discussions, you guys spoke with which of the state agencies regarding the type of equipment and appropriate way to set up such a surgical room?
Well, it's actually national, the ASPCA.
Okay, the national ASPCA.
Yeah, and they're based in, the unit we were working with is based in Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do this kind of thing, and they sent me a list of everything that we need to begin the surgeries.
And just as a highlight, Bill, what are a few of the major items that would be necessary in such a room?
Well, there's surgery and prep tables, there's anesthesia equipment, there's oxygen equipment, an autoclave, which you may know sterilizes the instruments and lighting and just the smaller things as well. Obviously, we're not doing x-rays, we're not doing the major things. We'll continue to go with the local vets in that scenario. And I want to say that since she's started, she probably treats 4 to 5 animals every time that she's there that would have gone to a vet. So she's already saving us money.
Excellent. So inasmuch, through these discussions with Bill, I agreed to bring forward to the board a request for a $25,000 amount to underwrite the cost of setting up and providing the necessary equipment as Bill's just described, and should there be any additional beyond that, the board and the SPCA would provide that funding. And I really believe, and given the anecdotal evidence you've just given, the cost savings and offset from not having to go outside and pay for the surgeries will adequately compensate and offset this. So I guess I'm presenting a motion to approve $25,000 to the shelter, the SPCA shelter, for the purpose of setting up and supplying a new surgical room.
Commissioner, oh, excuse me. There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Ross, been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Floor is open for discussion. That I understand your comments that 25,000, but future we could require additional funding?
No, I said if there's any additional funding or if the costs of the equipment exceed 25, that would fall to the board of the SPCA, and they would, through fundraising, whatever, make up the difference.
Okay, I misunderstood you.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you.
Bill,
I appreciate
got to
it.
ask you.
Yeah.
Is your office one of the kennel pens now? What's the deal?
We've got a tent set up out back. It's
We're
windy
working on that.
sometimes, but Bill's okay.
No, it was a room that we had cats in. But because of our Operation Homeless Cats, we have so many less cats this year. So we have the space.
Okay, good. Good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you. County Manager.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item 10. This is USDOT's 2023 Protect Grant Program. This is some good news. You all remember we had the chairman and you all set up the Highway 12 Task Force, and we spent a lot of time with a lot of folks trying to put that report together, and we did. When it was completed, the chairman and I think maybe the vice chairman, we went to Raleigh and met with the legislative leaders in both the House and the Senate, as well as the governor's office, trying to promote the idea that they needed to begin working on. We also met with the secretary at DOT to move forward with plans to do something with those hot spots on Hatteras Island. At that time, the Protect Grant had just come out, and we were proposing that they use those funds to start looking at that. Well, what's before you today is a letter in support of, they've given the acronym SAND, and it's, again, to provide access to Hatteras Island, but DOT has retained a company and they're involved with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the National Park Service. We're included in that working group as well. And they're putting together a process to get it to the permitting stage and get all that stuff done in the NEPA process and all that up front, and need a letter of support from stakeholders, of which we're one, to help support their efforts to get the Protect Grant money to pay for that process. Doesn't mean we're about to get bridges, doesn't mean anything about future construction. What it does is it gets all the preliminary stuff out of the way. Now it's something that has to be done, and we still have to work on them, and DOT still has to work towards funding something. But this is the first step in that process, and so that's a good thing. And so our efforts seem to have helped some, and so this is what's needed from us to continue that to go forward. Barton's here. He's worked on that. He's been in contact with those folks in some detail. I don't know, Barton, if there's anything else that needs to be added that I haven't added.
I think you covered everything.
Okay. And so with that said, we ask you to approve and authorize us to send that letter in support of this program, and I'll keep you updated as it moves forward.
Do I have a motion to approve a letter of support to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation?
So moved. Yeah, second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner House. It's been seconded by Commissioner Ross. Any further discussion?
Just real quick, do we know an approximation of what we're looking for here, the funding of the SAND grant application will build upon the work of the task force. I'm just wondering if we have a scale, Barton.
Barton can address that.
I don't know if I know the number.
We don't have a scale on like what kind of funding they're reaching out for, but we do know they're focused on the canal zone visitor center area between Morgan Inlet and Rodeo.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is this a $50,000 grant study? Is this a $500,000 grant study? Is it a $5 million grant study? Not the project, just the grant study that we're talking about here.
I'll reach out to
We
I don't have that
We
number.
don't know that.
I don't know. What
I was just wondering if
don't
we
know.
had a scale of
I
magnitude.
may have it upstairs in my stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to get my only point is, I'm obviously in favor of it, and I'm thrilled that the task force has progressed and gotten to this point. I was just curious, I'm thinking if it's a smaller amount, we have a great chance of getting it, and if it's too large, they may just shuffle us around, is what's behind my question.
We'll try to find that.
All right, that's all. Thanks, yeah.
Okay, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, next on the agenda is the fiscal year 2024 through 2028 recommended capital improvement plan. I'm going to give you sort of a executive summary to set the table, and then Dave's going to come in with the numbers and the details, and at the end, or if you have questions, we can talk about that. As you know, we approved a capital improvement plan last year, and we approved one the year before that. And we had in that all of the EMS stations and all the things that we were going to build, and we had in that the public works, and we had in that what we wanted to do with parks and recreation. And over the last 2 years, as we've gone through that, as it's no surprise, costs have escalated tremendously, and we don't have the funds available to do everything we thought we could do 2 years ago. The other thing you're going to hear about is our capital finance program. We have our capital improvement plan and the school's capital improvement plan combined, and you hear us talk about coverage ratios and all that stuff all the time when we're looking at how we're spending money and issuing debt. And when you start talking about coverage ratios, you're talking about having enough money in savings to pay your debt service for some period of time. And if it's the coverage ratio is 1, it means you have enough to pay 1 year of debt service you've got set aside to pay that. If it's 1.5, then you have a year and a half. And so we have coverage ratios. And when we started looking at our capital finance plan, our coverage ratios look great. And when we looked at it a little deeper, we found that what was happening was we had a lot of money in the capital improvement finance plan that was designated for schools, and that's money that the source of funds comes from, like the lottery or something that can only be used for school. We can't move it and do anything else. Since the schools aren't growing and we're not adding or building new schools, that fund grows. If you combine it with our other things, it makes those coverage ratios go up. But really, it's inflating the coverage ratios of the projects that we use other funds for. So we separated them out. And so now what we found was that we couldn't build all of the projects that we wanted to on the county side and keep our coverage ratios at 1 is what you all have got in your policy without making some changes. And so we went through and we made those changes and submitted those to the Capital Improvement Committee. We've had a couple of meetings about that, have gone through them in some detail. They're going to recommend to you, or have recommended to you, what Dave's going to present in just a minute. But the long and the short of that is we had to rearrange projects and we had to rearrange EMS stations. And what we did is we asked Chief Collins to look at our priorities on 2 things. Where do we need them the most, and where are we furthest along where we could actually make them happen? And those were 2 important criteria, because Rodanthe, for example, is one of the ones that probably needs to be improved as much or more than anything else. But it's also one of the ones where we don't have anywhere to do that. We don't have any land. We don't have a plan. We don't it is a long ways down the road before we'd be able to do that. So it got a lower priority than something else. we then set those priorities, and basically what we did differently than what was done before is the Rodanthe EMS station, the Parks and Rec programming that we had done, the Manio EMS station and the Frisco EMS station got pushed sort of to the back burner. The Manio and the Frisco station, they needed a cleanup and a dress up, and while we were doing it, we were going to add some square footage for common space and that kind of thing, but you know, that's not necessarily required. So we moved those back because the other stations that we're going to do, we needed the Kitty Hawk station for response times, and we need the Nags Head station for response times. And so some of the other stations that we're going to do in the first phases we needed those more than we needed the ones I just told you that we moved out. And so when we moved those around, rephased them, we added in the youth center into that. You know, we've got phase 1 that we're doing now. In phase 2, we'll do Mans Harbor and Kitty Hawk, and we'll do the youth center. In phase 3, we'll do Nags Head, and we'll do the public works at a scale down. We had to cut some stuff out of the public works. 2 things we cut out was, one, in Buxton, we were going to build a brand new fuel depot down there. That was a big ticket item. We pulled that out. We could make do with the fuel depot that we have down there now. The second thing that we did in public works was, if you all had seen the plans earlier, where we had multiple buildings, one's for buildings and ground, and one was for sanitation, and one was for fleet maintenance, and so on. We pulled the buildings and grounds building out, and we're going to keep buildings and grounds where they are now. That's about an $8 or $9 million savings off of the plan, and then we'll put that in with the other EMS stations and things and the Parks and Rec things to do down the road, or do pay as you go. As we get money, as things change, we'll start working on some of those projects. But what's going to be presented to you will hit hit the most important things that we need done, and get those projects going. We're hopeful that we don't have to come back to you again to change it again before we start construction. I think we've said that every time we've brought this to you, and every time it's changed. Our architects are telling us now that as they're bidding schools and building commercial things that they're doing, the pricing seems to have flattened out some. So we're not expecting anything to get any cheaper, but hopefully, you know, over the next year while we're doing these projects, they won't get any more expensive. However, if any of that stuff changes, then we're going to have to go back and look at this again. And the last thing I'll tell you is, to make this all work, we had to take we had in our fund balance about $10 million more than what we're hoping to get as a 25% fund balance minimum. We had $10 million over that. We took $6 million of that and put it in the capital plan to make this work, and that left us with $4 million that's still in the fund balance to do discretionary things that you might want to do later on to save for the future. So that's the executive summary without getting into all the nits of all the details of the cost. Dave's going to take you through in more detail what I just told you, and then we'll be glad to answer any questions, and he'll correct anything that I've just misstated, if anything. All right. With that said, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Okay. Okay, as Bobby said, you're seeing on the first screen, we've got 2 models now. We hired our FA, DEC, and Associates to actually split them into 2. And I'll talk about both of them. So why we had to split that into 2 and what changed with schools. You've got 2 revenue sources that are restricted just for school capital or debt service for school capital. You have to restrict 30% of the Article 40, which is a population-based distribution, is a smaller number, and 60% of the Article 42, which is half population and half pointed distribution. That's a larger number. And what happened over time was the growth of those taxes. this is the annual growth rate at the end of each of the 3 years. So the annual growth rate for the years ended in 21 was 8.8%, but by the time we get to 23, it's 13.5% per year. So that revenue grew. As we knew would happen, the debt service decreased. Your debt service amount just for schools in 2019 was $9.5 million. By the time we get to the end of the CIP, it's 1.9. So we had the restriction rising and the cost actually going down. And what this shows you is the school debt service is in orange, and it shows you the 5 years before the plan and the plan. So we started off at around $9.5 million, and we end up at less than 2. Then the sales taxes have grown from just over 4 million, and by the end of the plan will be somewhere around 7.5 or 8. The gray line is what you put in to school capital over and above the restricted required amounts. So in 2019, you did about 6.5 million, but by 2026, that's 0. And once you hit that 0, you don't get any credit for how much more you did in the past. It's just if you don't do enough, if you don't spend it all, you've got to restrict that money in fund balance specifically for school capital. So as I said, now we've got, we split the models. We had to do it earlier when we first started doing this. That 0 showed up in like 2029 or 2030. Those factors escalated that into 2026. Now you've got some handouts that came from stuff I fixed last week in the model that wasn't ready for the agenda book. And I'll go through those as we go, but they include the Capital Investment Fund dashboard, a schedule showing our debt service as a percentage of general fund expenditures, and an 8.5 by 11 page that we call a summary, but it really is a summary. Then the school model summary, and Commissioner Ross, I did not see your email till this morning, but so I attached the fund balance projection. Okay. and I'll talk about these handouts as we go along quickly. And so, right now, phase 1, what we're calling phase 1 is under construction. That was EMS in Kill Hills, EMS in Southern Shores, and the DARE Med-Flight. That was $42.9 million. Issued those bonds in April. They're all under construction. Now, as Bobby said, phase 2 is the fiscal 2024 projects, which have had a little bit of rearranging, but it's EMS station in Mans Harbor, and then EMS station in Kitty Hawk. And I've got a note up there on page 34. That's your agenda book, not the page at the bottom, but the PDF page number. So it'll say 34 of, I think it's 82 as we go through these. And each of those has a little bit more detail than what you're seeing up here. The Kitty Hawk number we used, Oakley Collier told us, is basically going to be the same station as Southern Shores. Take the Southern Shores number and escalate it by 2 years. So we're Southern Shores ended up actual at 8.8. We're using 10.1 million as the estimate. And then the Manio Youth Center in phase 2. The earliest we can be on the Local Government Commission agenda is their February 24 meeting. So we'll do it sometime February, March, April of next year, depending upon Oakley Collier. We're waiting on Oakley Collier and Barnhill to get us some numbers based on substituting in the Kitty Hawk station. And then we'll come back to you with those specific project budgets. Then the phase 3 would be the following year. I need the first debt service not to be in fiscal 25 to make the whole model work, so it'll probably be like maybe May or June. That includes, as Bobby said, the public works reduced by about $10 million. That amounts $31.1 million. The Buxton Solid Waste Transfer Station, which is just to be able to continue what you're doing with commercial operations right now. Moving in the EMS station in Nags Head, And then we had a request for a sheriff's criminal investigative division building, and right now that's $2 million, and it's just a number. There's no estimate, there's no design, but we will get Oakley Carter on that. And then the final items that Bobby mentioned that we'll address as we can, EMS in Manio, which was the full design by Oakley Carter, was $4.2 million. EMS in Frisco was $2.4. We were using 7.7 for Rodanthe, and then the Oakley Carter report on Parks and Recreation, which everything in there was $28 million. The coverage, we're in good shape in the first 5 years. It stays in good shape right now. The minimum is way out in 2041 at basically 1 times. The assumptions we've made, 1/4 of 1% for growth in land transfer tax, so we're being very conservative. There's a project in 2028 that's got replacement of the Collins Walkway here at these buildings out to this, all the way out to the Sound. That assumes a grant. Then, as Bobby mentioned, right now the estimate, which is the very last page of the handouts, is that we'll be $10.9 million over the target of 25% for unassigned fund balance. You've used $1 million of that last meeting for the Dare Education Foundation for teacher housing. This would use another $6 million, so it'd leave $3.944 million over your minimum target. Still, if you available if you had to use had a use for it, or to save it for next time. Oh, and I was going to say, after we close out the year, I'll bring a budget amendment to you for the $6 million transfer. Then on page 35 of your agenda book, it just summarizes all the projects by type. So you've got the first 2 items, which are bond issues. Then going through the list, our CIP program, which we're paying for cash. We've identified items that we can finance all the short-term debts over 5 years or less. Annual support to the school capital program, which I briefly mentioned, is $1.6 million in 24 and $645,000 in 25, and then goes to 0. Our capital outlay, vehicles, major equipment, both pay-go and cash. We've included roof replacements, HVAC replacements, and then Dare Med-Flight, which we do have one short-term debt for Dare Med-Flight to replace the engines in 2028. And this is a summary of what you're doing in long-term debt, what you're doing in short-term debt, what you're doing in pay-go. So about $71 million in bonds, $21 million in short-term 5-year debt over the 5 years, and almost $11 million in pay-as-you-go. And that's a pretty good balance. Then just some things I wanted to make sure you knew are in there in the detail, starting on your page 36. We had done a reimbursement resolution and said we were going to do Manio, Frisco, and Rodanthe as a piece of debt. If we're not doing them as a piece of debt, we can't finance those architectural fees as part of a debt issue. So those have to change to pay-go. You still got all the 60% drawings that belong to the county for use, but we've got to use cash instead of debt proceeds. So that's in 2024. There's replacing the elevators in this building and the Human Services building. There's 2 of them there in 24. There's an IT network replacement, about $500,000 to replace everything in 24. As I mentioned, in 24 and 25, the support to the school model. In 26, there is the replacement of all the law enforcement, emergency management, and EMS radios. It's just over $3 million. 27 and 28 replacing the HVAC systems in this building. And as I mentioned, in 28, about $1.8 million to replace the Med-Flight engines. Then on your handouts, the first one's the dashboard from the CIP, and a couple of things from that is your maximum level of debt hits in 2025 at $153 million. The maximum debt service is 2027 at 18.4. These three slides are at the bottom of the dashboard, and it just shows the coverage by year and how much the green bars are how much fund balance you have over 50% of the debt service. So that's, you know, a safety cushion. This one shows your total debt service, which is the blue at the bottom, compared to your total fund balance, how much, you know, more coverage you have of the fund balance than the debt service payments, and then a detail of the different types by year, whether you're doing it with bonds or PAYGO or there are med flights in there and vehicle financings. And then probably the most important thing I'm showing you is I'd finished the 5-year projection for the general fund that we do every year and included in the budget document, but what I didn't have was how much the debt service was going to be from the CIP. So once we have the recommended CIP, I could plug in the debt service, and this shows the gray bar at the top in the middle is the projection. And so those numbers are the percentage of debt service of your total budget. The LGC and the rating agencies like to see a number of around 16% or below, because if you have say a very, like a COVID event, you can't adjust those expenditures. You can't make adjustments to those. Those are kind of fixed. So they want that level or below. And we never get above, the highest point is in 25 at 14.25. Now, we also do a low growth scenario. What if things slow down a lot, or a high growth? And if things slow down a lot under the low growth, your bottom number gets smaller, so your debt service percentage gets larger. But the highest that gets is in 2025 at 15.25. So either way, you know, granted, with a lot of assumptions, we are in good shape with that measure. Then on the schools, yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't hit the green button. The percentage of debt service or the interest rate on the bonds that are used in the model, because you've just shown that we're well within our safety zone in terms of coverage, and we are under the state's expected 16%. Right. And I wanted to point out that's even with interest rates at?
We're using generally 4.25%.
And if I go back a year, 2, 3, what kind of interest were we paying?
A year ago, we did 360.
Okay.
They're up right now, but right now, if you said do one right now, we'd use around 4%.
So historically, have we been at 4.5%?
No.
No, nowhere near it.
No.
And
right now we're at a high, and this is a finance director thing that we don't ever really worry about that too much, because rates are going to go down at some point during the life of the bonds, and you're going to refinance them.
You're getting to my point. I was leading you there. So if they do, this can only get better as a financial picture.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's right. Then the actual school model, and I shared this with the school staff last week, is this next to the last page. And you know, you can see with again, it's conservative estimates on the sales tax growth. We've got their PAYGO projects in there, which is their local capital outlay, and their CIP. And their CIP detail is included in your agenda packet. It starts on page 40. And you know, the one thing this model does not have is anything to be done with early college. And we've got Oakley College looking at those buildings right now. We've got them under contract to look at those and give us estimates on what those will be. But with these numbers, I do not think they're going to be an issue by by the end of 5 years, it's showing $9 million fund balance. At the end of 10 years, $32 million. And again, put that in context of the county issued around $135 million of debt for schools between 2001 and 2007. And now 20 years later, those are falling away. So the school capacity is there, or it will be in the future. And this, I did this quickly just to show you, how those work, where, again, the blue line's the revenue that's available. The red line's the debt service that, by the end of, by 2030, it's less than $100,000 a year. The pay-go, we've escalated at a fairly good rate at 5%. And again, the support goes, the green line goes to zero at 2026. So the capacity for any future school projects, with some of the prices I've seen on school buildings lately, you can't build a new building with that, but that's significant capacity.
I think sorry to interrupt, I think one thing to consider is our school population doesn't really seem to go through any big fluctuations. I think if we're taking care of our buildings with a low growth population model here, that is beneficial.
And you're spending $2.5 million a year.
Just keep what you got.
And cash pay-go to keep up with things, and they do a really good job of scheduling those out.
If the real estate market is still stable, still a lot of demand. We had one cluster home project here. There's other subdivisions, other stuff that's going to be coming up in front of the planning board. Do you foresee any impact of, are we going to have a building boom? Is that going to stress services for public works, the Buxton transfer station, a lot of building and unincorporated there? Is there anything we really haven't taken into account that?
If we had we'd have issues if we had another large decrease in the realty transfer tax, but you've already had a 34% annual decrease, from what it was 2 years ago. We just got the July numbers, and it was down from last July. It was like almost 700,000, and to meet the model, we need about 900,000 a month, but we've been getting 1.1. So.
And we've got phase 2 coming. We'll, start phase 2 after the first of the year. If something crazy happened between now and the first of the year, then we have the opportunity to redo this, and then phase 3 doesn't start until July of next year. Right. And so we've got a whole year to look and see before we get to the point of no return on those things too.
Good points.
Yeah, you'll be doing this process again during the budget cycle next spring. So.
And then, as with respect to schools, the only thing that is, other than the things we know, chiller replacements and roof, all that kind of stuff is always built in. But the early college is the next sort of new thing, and there's sufficient funds there. That lottery fund, that all those revenue sources he described that grow that we can't spend except on schools can be used to fund some of that, so we don't have to go back into the general fund or into our capital improvement fund to do those things. So we're in pretty good shape there too. Absent some explosion in the school population, we had to build a school in the near future, then we're good.
Press.
What is the PSCB fund? I don't know what that
Bobby
is.
said that, and I realized I forgot to mention that. That is the Public School Capital Building Fund. That is the lottery money that comes to each county. The state holds that money, and you have to make applications to the state to draw it down each year for whatever. It's a pretty stringent process if you're using it for a building or an HVAC replacement, but if you use it for debt service, it's easy because the capital item behind it's already gone through their scrutiny. So,
Is that lottery, the public schools money? Is that a growing fund? Does that grow?
It's not grown that much. It's around $350,000, $360,000 a year, and it's.
static pool of money?
It's very, very small growth, yeah.
Well, it's gone from 300,000, 4.3 million on this.
Growing faster than we're
Yeah,
spending.
it's growing, yeah.
That's
Well,
true.
that's a good thing, okay.
It's on this page, Danny, where it's public schools. You could see our fund balance has gone 28 million without it, another 4 million with it, to 33 million in June of 33.
Right.
We have to start importing kids from Currituck County
That's not.
and build another building. Okay, thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
And so I don't know if you have other questions, but that is the capital improvement plan that has been recommended by your capital improvement committee. And so it's before you to ask questions, and if you don't have any, then for your approval.
And there's,
We need to adopt the 3 budget amendments and the 2 capital project ordinances as presented. Okay, so motion, there's a motion on the floor by Vice Chairman to approve, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion, any likewise against? Those, motion carries unanimously.
Good job.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, David. David's got a new tool that expedited this process with the model he has, where we can go in now and move numbers around, and it balances everything out. And it's a lot different than how we did it before. We had to sort of manually do it each time. So
Yeah, it makes, when we're in there on the whiteboard sessions, the ability to modify assumptions and immediately see the change in the model gives very good sensitivity analysis. That's good.
I'm smiling because there's still a lot of manual behind that, so.
much better than it was. So
Get
thank
those
you for
work
that.
gloves on and let's get that manual thing.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that takes us to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have the approval of the minutes from July. We have the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program local government resolution. We have Dare County Health and Human Services Public Health Opioid Settlement Funds Budget Amendment for fiscal year 2024. The Southern Albemarle Association Annual Meeting Invitation List, a resolution to approve a sole source purchase, a resolution reimbursement for fiscal year 2023-24, Public Works and IT equipment financing.
Mr. Chairman, in memory and honor of Commissioner Jack Shea, when he was sitting up here, when the consent agenda came up, he was the first one to speak up and approve the consent agenda. I would like to do that in his honor today.
Absolutely. Motion to approve the consent agenda by Commissioner House has been seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Ross. Any further discussion?
I remember
Hearing
those
those,
moments well.
Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
We miss you, Jack.
Hope he heard you.
In my shuffle of capital improvement plans, I lost the board appointment sheet here.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler's on it.
It's all right. Roanoke Island Community Center.
Here we go. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, this is probably not the right place to put this in the agenda, and I'd like to bring it back next time. It's a modification to the bylaws, and we probably need to put it on an agenda item so that if you
Yeah.
have questions or concerns,
Yep.
it's the
I think it's
appropriate
good.
place to
Yeah.
take care of it. So we'll do that for next time, if that's all right. You don't have any appointments this month. Your upcoming appointments are the Health and Human Services Board with 2 terms expiring. In October, the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council has 3 terms expiring. And the Transportation Advisory Board has 1 term expiring. And then in November, the Health and Human Services Board has 1 term expiring. And that would be your agenda, Mr. Chairman.
All right, that brings us to item 14, the Commissioner's business, County Manager's business. Commissioner Bateman, do you mind kicking it off this morning?
Don't mind at all. We lost a centenarian, Miss Alma Heyman, Kitty Hawker, 100 years old. She passed away. Great lady, just a super individual. a true outer banker. So we lost her. And speaking of Jack, I had didn't have the privilege of serving on the board, but I did call Jack up one time and informed him that I had intentions of running for the county commissioner seat that he held. And in the conversation that we had, or about 15, 20 minutes, I came to realize that we basically had the same philosophy and on the same political agenda. So I refrained from running that year. But he was quite a character, and he was very matter-of-factly when you spoke with him. And he said, well, I'm going to run. I went, okay. Well, I'm not going to because...
What he left out was, I'm going to whoop you, Irv.
and yeah. But anyway, just a classy guy. So I liked him a lot, and good person. And I kind of need, I'm going to just make this statement, and kind of want y'all to understand where I come from. On development, guys, I'm kind of old school. You have to understand, I've been here my whole life. And so I was around when we had the Sun and Sand Motel that had 6 little apartments, and it was called a cottage court. Everybody had their own septic system in their yards and so forth. Small residential beach development. As a planning board member in the early 90s in the town of Kitty Hawk, I believed strongly in the land use plan, which dictates how we do development within not only the town of Kitty Hawk, but Dare County has the same thing. And it states low-density beach development, single-family septic systems, not massive building. So that's the school I come from. And when we look at projects such as the cluster homes, whatever, although skeptical and I understand growth has to come, I still have that mindset in the back. I am concerned about the direction that we're going with the brand new fantastic septic systems that we have that allows the developer, and a prime example is what I discussed before, was to take a piece of property over on the beach road and where it was one house there, and all of a sudden now we have 14 houses on that same piece of property. 5 years ago, you couldn't do that. You can with the new development procedures with septic systems. If everybody did that, we would have development beyond reason down here, in my humble opinion. So if I come off as being really, really conservative, it's because I am. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean your opinion's wrong or that mine's wrong. It just means that I've always had that approach. The town of Kitty Hawk, if you look at the Kitty Hawk right now, you ride in the beach road, it looks completely different than the Southern Shores. It looks completely different than Duck, Nag's Head, Kildover Hills for sure, because of the ability to develop on the ocean side, but also the rules and regulations that those members of the council members put in place for development in that town. They kept with their low residential beach development scale. So that's kind of where I want to explain that to you because, you know, I was looking for a way to turn this project down in Avon. I was looking for a way to reduce development. I couldn't do that though because legally I had to abide by the law. So anyway, that's kind of where I am. Just want you to understand. I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Couch.
Thank you, Irvin, for that assessment on development. You know, we've had this essential housing up in our face, and it's been priority one for a long time, and I feel like we've met it. We've taken the largest burden of it. That's not to say that the employers and others have not been willing to do so, but we've been running against the wind on this, but we have had some successes, and we have rescinded that ordinance in lieu of something we hope will be more beneficial. But, you know, I appreciate your sentiments on it, but I think we had some success with it. We'll see going forward. We're just trying to meet the need, and because everybody on this board knows of people who are living in trailers and stuff, and we're just trying. We've got a humanitarian side to this. This is not all numbers and lumber and stuff. We're trying to do the right thing for people. So I'm somewhat bittersweet, but we're doing what we can to meet it. Secondly, Jack Shea, and I apologize. I know some of our guys, some of the board here was able to go to his service, but I struck up a friendship with Jack. I love to hear him laugh. He did have a pretty dry, pretty good sense of humor, and but he had a skill of taking his affection for me and my personality and others and putting a kibosh on it when he needed to. If he hadn't wanted to tell he would do so. And to his credit, he made me feel good about it. So I lost a lot of battles with him, or a handful in the short time that we were together. National Aviation Day coming up, folks. Here Saturday, the 19th, I got to hand it to the First Flight Committee. They have done a good job. There are some really, really good speakers, and you got to understand about our place in flight. It's not restricted to Wilbur and Orville Wright. I mean, those are the guys that carry the banner for us. But you had others. The birth of strategic bombing occurred here. This guy Billy Mitchell, he was probably the most. Well, there's not a probably to it. He was the most controversial, polarizing airmen this country's ever produced, and the battles he fought, which has always amazed me, that the Secretary of the Navy at the time that Mitchell was pushing for the third dimension of warfare, which had to be from the air, and he's up against the generals and the admirals and stuff, and they didn't want to hear it. So one of his chief adversaries on this was our own Josephus Daniels from Wanchese. So here's his Secretary of the Navy, a guy whose roots were in Wanchese, and then this guy Billy Mitchell, who would arrange his schedule to make sure he could go fishing and hunting down on the Outer Banks. So here we are fighting out these future events that we still do not have the total ramification of all the good that's going to come out of the future of air power. They're fighting it out here in our area. And but I mean, you throw Amelia Earhart into that. Charles Lindbergh was out in this area, and fortunately, these guys, they appreciated the local people and their hospitality. But number two, particularly in the case of Mitchell, these guys like to fish, and with the stresses and pressures of the world on them, this is how when it was starting to take its toll, battling with Congress and everything. The Outer Banks never failed to deliver for them for their R&R. But if you can come on out on the 19th, they've done a really good job. I respect the effort that has been pushed forward. We're dealing with the fact that we're post-pandemic now, so hopefully we're going to not be overrun with things. And then I wanted to make that comment when Dave was doing his presentation on the good work that the CIP committee did too. But we're matching what's going on post-pandemic. I mean, there's some growth going on here. We got out of a bad funk. I think if we ever have a pandemic again, hopefully we've learned a lot. I mean, this board learned a lot. Certainly did. We were right there on the front lines. We did what we had to do based on the information and, in a lot of cases, the facts that were before us. And we were able to get through it. But anyway, coming out to National Aviation Day, do I have anything else? No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Tobin?
Yeah, I lost a really good friend this week. I don't know if any of you knew Kelly Zaytoon. Kelly was the general manager there at Pirates Cove for many years and helped me get to where I am today. He was a business partner of mine and a very close friend, and he died of very, very, very rare blood cancer. Only about 3 people a year get it in the United States. And unfortunately, about 23% of the people die from it, and it his life this past week. So I'd just like to ask for everybody to say some prayers and good thoughts for his family and keep him in your mind. And also, Jack Shea, my gosh, what can you say? Jack was one of my favorite commissioners of all time. Always truthful, always honest, and always told it like it was. But that's all I got.
Thank you, Jim. Commissioner Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could just echo Jim's comments. I won't belabor it. Everyone said basically what I felt about Jack, and obviously we all miss him. And it was an honor to be at his service and the graveside service that day. I want to welcome Mr. Commissioner Irv Bateman to the Northeast Workforce Development Board. He is our newest member, and as part of the Albemarle Commission, we welcome you, Commissioner Bateman. So good for you. Thank you. Number two, Commissioner, or I should say Vice Chair Overman and I attended the reception in Lost Colony from the Roanoke Island Historical Association last week for Governor Cooper's wife, First Lady Kristen Cooper. And I think an enjoyable and pleasant time was held by all, so thank you to Rhea. Today, I believe I have it correct, is National Purple Heart Day, where service members injured in the line of duty are recognized and appreciated, and I certainly would urge us all to recognize and thank them for that. Okay, I have two plugs I'm going to put in here. One, Friends of Jockey's Ridge. They are attempting to get 500 custom license plate registrants. They've got a beautiful custom plate that will support and help fund our most amazing state park at Jockey's Ridge. And if you go to the website, Friends of Jockey's Ridge, you can find out what information you need. I have already done so, but the plates are a beautiful sort of background rendition of Jockey's Ridge dunes, and they're North Carolina plates, and they're very distinctive, and we need a few more to reach the state minimum of 500. So I am challenging Dare County, step up and get those license plates. And the last one is a future date to keep in mind, a combined effort from our Dementia Friendly Coalition, the Outer Banks Tennis Foundation, and the Duckwoods Pickleball Group have a Love to Remember tournament and fundraiser, October 19 through 22. October 19 through 22. And all funds raised go to support efforts in dementia education, caregiving, and support. So I would urge you all to keep that date in mind, and it takes place at Duckwoods. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Ross. Speaking of pickleball, have you noticed, I know we're trying to do some new courts. Have you noticed throughout the country now, big box stores are making room for pickleball courts? We don't have any big box stores wide open any longer on Outer Banks, but I noticed that in the news this week that
I did not see
that towns and communities are turning big box stores into pickleball courts. Just food for thought. Commissioner House.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The North Carolina Marine Fisheries Commission is accepting public comments on 103 proposed rules pertaining to the data collection and the prevention of harassment of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries staff, the shellfish relay program, the shellfish leases, and franchisees of the oyster sanctuaries and shellfish sanitation procedures. The public hearing will be held on a web conference on August 16th at 6 p.m. So I'll definitely be listening in on that and trying to get some insight on some of these.
What was that about harassment?
Yeah, the prevention of harassment of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries staff.
Really?
What is all this? I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, who's harassing the staff?
Evidently, whenever they go to do data collection or in the field or whatever, or whenever they propose changes, they get harassed by members of the fishing community, not just commercial, but also.
So angry parents from a school board meeting are now on the watch list as well. There you go. Okay, got it.
So, evidently they're going to strengthen the rules a little bit on that.
There you go, okay. All right.
Because there are some rules for harassment on the patrol staff, just like it is for our sheriff's deputies and stuff like that, but nothing really for the, the biologists and stuff like that that are doing the work.
Gotcha.
So, also, at the Oregon Inlet Task Force, we had a very nice letter that was sent to us. As y'all are well familiar, back in May and June, we sent, Oregon Inlet was open, Hatteras Inlet was open. Lockwood Follies was having troubles, and so Miss Katie went down there. Alan Holden, the mayor of Holden Beach, sent us a very nice letter. He says, in reference to the emergency dredge in the Lockwood Follies Inlet, on behalf of the town of Holden Beach, property owners, citizens, and visitors, we thank you and all that are affiliated with Miss Katie. The Lockwood Follies Inlet is critical important to the town of Holden Beach and the surrounding areas. 1 month ago, we were looking at having access to the ocean cut off due to extreme shoaling in the inlet. So severe, in fact, the Coast Guard had removed all navigational aids. The Corps of Engineers did not have the capacity to perform maintenance dredging. Today, there is a freshly designed dredge channel provided by EJE's Miss Katie and facilitated by the task force. Thank you for your help in this important matter. If that's the second, if you'll show the first one, that's what it was. That's what the inlet looked like when Miss Katie got there. Less than 2 feet of water in some areas. The Army Corps of Engineers said that they would not go in there, did not even have access even to get in there with a sidecast to open the channel up. They were waiting for maybe some possible storm to come in to open up something so they could get in there. Now they do have about a 4 or 5 foot tide in there, and this is what Miss Katie was able to do. She opened up their channel for them. So very, very nice thank you letter. I wanted all of you to
Got it to 8
know.
to 10 feet in there.
Yep. And she is now marked and navigational. So, tonight at this afternoon at 4:30 at the town hall in Kitty Hawk, they're welcoming and having a reception for the new police chief. And seems to be, I've spoken to him briefly. Very nice fellow. If you're around Kitty Hawk, please come in and talk to him. It's going to be from 4:30 to 6, and then the town council meeting will be shortly thereafter. I can't say enough, like my fellow commissioners have, about Commissioner Shea. He was one of those people, you sat down with him and you talked to him, and no matter what the conversation was, you knew you were talking to someone with a friend that was who would tell you like it was. I mean, he didn't hold any punches back, and would explain to you any questions you might have. I mean, I can't say enough. I was honored to be there with the rest of my fellow commissioners and being a pallbearer to take him to his final resting place. And he's in his resting place. I ride by it every day, and every day I go by, I wave at him through the window as I ride by. And I will miss him dearly. And Jackie, our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family. Our day in history, 1959, Explorer 6 took the first photograph of Earth from space. And it's kind of remarkable in thinking of where we've gone in space since then. But in 1959, the first photo. Now, everybody knows about Instagram, and you put a picture up and post it. Takes what, milliseconds? It took 45 minutes for that photo to download to NASA. So look at remarkable how we've come along in computers as well. on a happy note, our pet of the week, meat, honey, and waffles.
Our pets of the week this week are Honey and Waffles. Honey and Waffles were born at the shelter in July of 2022. Unfortunately, they've been here for over a year. These two sweet girls love to play and run around. Honey and Waffles do get along with other cats and are beyond ready for their forever home. To adopt Honey and Waffles, or foster one of our other animals, you can come visit us Monday through Friday at our shelter located in Manio. For more information, visit obxspca.org or visit our OBX SPCA Facebook page.
So definitely run down to the SPCA, tell your spouse you're going to go pick up some honey and waffles from the store, and come home with cats and get them out of that shelter. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Couple of things. Donna Creef presented us a resolution in support of the National Flood Insurance Reauthorization and Reform Act of 2023 that Outer Banks Realtors had approved, and I had copies made for you guys and put in your place. I'd like to entertain us passing a similar resolution if it's a pleasure of the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Couch to do so. It's been seconded by Commissioner House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. I'm sorry, Jim?
He just said aye.
I said aye.
Oh, okay. I thought you was calling to say something else. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for doing that. Donna, thank you for spearheading that from the Board of Realtors, and see if we can get some traction. I said this earlier in Chairman's comments. The only real thing extra, I'll reiterate what I said about Jack, and that is simply greatest generation.
Absolutely.
I need not say any more other than that. He and I had numerous conversations every single week, just about every other day on the phone. We'd get away from a board meeting and he'd call me and say, Bob, I forgot about one thing. We need to do this. We need to do that. And they were all positive thoughts, and it was just a pleasure to know him and to work with him those 8 years on this board. So once again, I'll say rest in peace, Jack. God bless you. And God bless your service to our country. Les Schuyler, I want to welcome you again. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I got him. I'll get you. I got him out of order. Schuyler, again, welcome to the board. We look forward to working with you. I think you're going to do fine. The board has all the confidence in the world in your abilities for us. And once again, congratulations for that position and being named clerk to the board. Okay. And my apologies, Vice Chairman. I meant to come to you, and I went first. So I went around the line. See, I was next, and then you were next.
Well, my feelings are hurt.
So
I'll get over
we haven't finished there. Up to you.
As always, I want to recognize our service pin recipients for their 55 years of service, and our Employee of the Month, Norma. Again, Dare County couldn't work without them. On July 24th, Roxanna Ballinger and I met with the Opioid Funding Committee in Currituck County to basically go over with them how we are handling our opioid settlement funding. It was a very good meeting. We had representatives there. Their county manager was there, one of their commissioners, folks from the sheriff's office, YMCA, social services. So they had a good group of folks there. And we went over exactly what we're doing here. They are literally starting from ground zero. and are going to try to build a consensus on how to handle that funding. And they were very appreciative of the things that we told them, and I think it at least provides them with some starting points and things to consider as they go forward to manage their opioid funding. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about Jack. I hate that Donna had to leave because one of the things that we used to do, I was Jack's alternate on the RPO at the time, and we would go on the trips to over into Hertford, and he would tell us stories going and coming, but basically from his career, things that just life experiences that he had. And I'll tell you, he kept us in stitches. One of the things that he worked on was the stealth project, and some of the things that he told us about that were really unreal. He didn't go into a great deal of detail, obviously, because he couldn't, but one of the things that used to tickle him was, he said, I had a budget for the company I worked for, and he said, the CEO couldn't even restrict that budget or question me about where that money was going. And that was, he'd always tell that and just laugh out loud, you know, so that was cool. I had the pleasure of sitting next to him on this board for a number of years, and it was always a positive experience. But he was a perfect gentleman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Well said. County Manager.
Just real briefly, I'll mention Mr. Shea as well. I had the pleasure of knowing him before I ever was involved with the county or before he was even involved in politics. So I've known him for a really long time. He lived in my neighborhood about 2 houses down from me. As Mr. Commissioner Overman said, a fabulous storyteller and a fascinating life that he lived. And so if you talk about people who had a life well lived, he had a life well lived, and I'll certainly miss him as well. And you mentioned Skylar. Skylar's been working up in our office for the last 2 or 3 weeks trying to get acclimated, and we hadn't missed a beat. Everything has been smooth, and she's going to move right in, and you all won't see any changes, and everything will go along smoothly. So we're in good hands, and great to have her aboard. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate that. Public Information Officer, Ms. Hester, do you have anything?
All have all spoken about Mr. Shea. My greatest memory of him is we would kind of leave at the same time at the end of the meetings, and he would always, he had a heavy foot. He blamed me. He said I had a heavy foot. I told him he had a heavy foot because we'd always kind of go home next to each other and wave. But he was a wonderful man. Just one note: tax bills went out last week, so we put a release out just reminding people that they were mailed or emailed, and they're due September 1st, but can be paid through January 5th without any interest. And there are payment plans, so Becky and her staff work with everyone to try to come up with a plan if necessary, if someone wants to make payments. They're paid online, by phone, in person, and auto draft. So a lot of information. It's all on the website.
Great.
I saw Hosey the other day about that, and I told him that I was going to be sending him a check, and that if it bounced, let me know, and I'd send him another one just like it.
Was Jim going to say something?
Jim has said something.
Okay. I didn't know if he just was getting ready to speak just then.
Did you have something else, Jim?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dorothy.
Oh, and I want to tell Matt, I think I sent him a text message, but I was able to hear speakers today at the podium clearly.
Oh, good.
With the new speakers. I don't know if you all noticed a difference, but I did over here.
Yeah, once they stepped up to the mic, we could.
Yeah, and he put a lot of work into that.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Matt. That's all.
Thank you, Dorothy. Finance Director, Mr. Clausen, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Well, very good meeting. Good day, gentlemen. I need a motion to adjourn until September the 6th.
So moved.
Okay, it's motion on the floor by Commissioner House. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Hang in there, Jim.
Will do. Thank you.